Hey there, welcome to Brad Arrows. Tonight, we've got hours of chilling horror stories combined with soothing rain sounds to help you relax and sleep. Before you drift off, leave a comment below and let us know where you're listening from and what time it is. If these stories give you chills, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Get cozy and let the fear take over. Harsh fluorescent lights of Willowbrook Medical Center's emergency room cast sharp shadows across Dr. Maria Rodriguez's face as she pressed the stethoscope against Lisa Chen's forearm. The room fell silent. Maya clutched her mother's hand, tears streaming down her 16-year-old cheeks. Then it happened again. That sound like plastic wrap being crumpled beneath the skin. A soft, unmistakable crackling that shouldn't come from human flesh. "Dear God," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, pulling back. Lisa's arm had turned a sickening greenish blue, the skin peeling away in papery sheets. She caught her reflection in the metal cabinet, her own terrified eyes staring back at her. The nurse who had spent 15 years healing others was now the patient no one could diagnose. "Whatever's under your skin," Dr. Rodriguez said gravely, "it's spreading. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from." Now let's continue with the story. Lisa Chen had always been the caretaker, never the one needing care. At 35, her life had settled into a predictable rhythm in Willowbrook, where everyone knew everyone's business and the changing seasons dictated the pace of life. The small Ohio town was the only home she'd ever known. Its rolling hills and tight-knit community providing a safety net she relied on, especially after David left. The divorce had been finalized 5 years ago, leaving Lisa to raise Maya alone. David Park had moved to Columbus to work for BioGrow Industries, a major agricultural supplier, choosing career advancement over small-town family life. Their parting wasn't bitter so much as resigned. Two people who'd married too young, realizing they wanted different things. Maya, now 16, and blossoming into a thoughtful young woman with her father's analytical mind and her mother's compassion, had adapted better than Lisa expected. Working as a registered nurse at Willowbrook Medical Center gave Lisa purpose and stability. Her colleagues were like family, especially since Mom passed last autumn. Grace Chen had been Willowbrook's most beloved kindergarten teacher for 25 years before lung cancer took her quickly. Too quickly for proper goodbyes. The loss left a vacuum that Lisa struggled to fill, finding solace only in her daughter and the organic garden that had been her mother's pride and joy. Mom always said, "Dirt under your fingernails means a healthy soul," Lisa often told Maya as they tended the sprawling vegetable patch behind their modest 2-story home. The garden became Lisa's therapy, a living connection to Grace, and a practical way to put fresh food on their table. Every evening after her shift, regardless of exhaustion, Lisa would spend at least an hour nurturing her plants, finding peace in the rhythm of growth and harvest. The other nurses teased her about her health nut tendencies, but Lisa stood firm in her organic practices. "If I'm going to spend all day helping people recover from illness," she'd say, "I'm certainly not going to poison myself or my daughter with chemicals." She sourced everything locally. Seeds from the family-owned hardware store, natural pest deterrents from online gardening forums, and compost from Morrison's organic farm on the outskirts of town. Lisa Chen's garden was her sanctuary, her link to the past, and her hope for the future. A future she never imagined could be threatened by the very soil she trusted. April in Willowbrook brought the familiar symphony of spring. Robins announcing dawn, tractors humming in distant fields, and Lisa Chen's garden tools clinking against stone as she prepared her beds for planting. This year's garden would be special. She'd ordered heirloom tomato varieties that Mom had always wanted to try, planning to dedicate an entire section to Grace's memory. "Maya, the Morrisons' delivery is here," Lisa called through the screen door, wiping perspiration from her brow with the back of her gloved hand. The morning sun was already warm, promising a beautiful Saturday for gardening. Maya emerged reluctantly, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, phone still clutched in her hand. "Mom, I told Jessica I'd help with her chemistry project today. This won't take long," Lisa promised, gesturing to the truck backing into their driveway. "Just help me unload and you can be on your way. Besides, this is practically biology in action." Samuel Morrison, a weathered 60-something farmer whose family had worked the same land for 4 generations, hopped down from his pickup. "Morning, Chen's. Got your special delivery. Best batch of the season, if I do say so myself." The truck bed contained several bags of dark, rich compost, the organic fertilizer that had helped Lisa win the county fair's Best Vegetable Garden 2 years running. "Thank you, Sam. How's Margaret doing after her knee surgery?" Lisa asked, medical instincts never fully dormant. "Getting stronger every day. Says your colleagues at the medical center treated her like royalty." He tipped his worn baseball cap. "Got something extra for you this time. We're trying a new composting method. Breaks down faster, more nutrients. The folks at BioGrow Industries say it's the future of organic farming." Lisa beamed. "That's wonderful. I've been reading about accelerated composting. Now, this batch is fresh. Might be a bit more, pungent than you're used to," Sam warned as he and Maya hefted the first bag toward Lisa's garden. "But the results should be worth it." After Sam left, Lisa and Maya spent the next hour working the dark, rich material into the garden beds. The smell was indeed stronger than usual, causing Maya to wrinkle her nose in disgust. "This is beyond gross, Mom," she complained, holding her t-shirt over her nose. "Fresh compost is more potent," Lisa explained, digging barehanded despite the garden gloves she'd laid out. She'd always believed in connecting directly with the soil. "It hasn't been fully processed, but that means more nutrients for our vegetables. Sam knows what he's doing." Maya rolled her eyes. "If you say so, can I go now?" "Jessica's waiting." Lisa nodded, already lost in the meditative rhythm of gardening. "Be back for dinner. I'm making Grandma's stir-fry with last year's preserved vegetables." As afternoon stretched into evening, Lisa lost track of time. The garden had expanded over the years, now covering most of their backyard. Raised beds for vegetables, trellises for beans and cucumbers, and a small greenhouse for starting seedlings. Each section held memories. The strawberry patch she and Maya had planted when Maya was 7. The herb spiral built the summer after the divorce. The raspberry bushes that had been Grace's 70th birthday gift. The setting sun cast long shadows across the yard when Lisa finally noticed the mosquitoes. April mosquitoes were always the hungriest, she thought absently, swatting at her arm. One particularly persistent insect had found the soft skin near her elbow, leaving an angry red welt that immediately began to itch. "Darn it," she muttered, scratching the bite with soil-caked fingernails. The momentary relief was worth the dirt she was grinding into her skin. Lisa had never been one to worry about a little garden soil. "It's cleaner than most hospital surfaces," she often joked to her more germophobic colleagues. By the time she finished planting the last row of peas, darkness had fallen completely. Lisa gathered her tools, gave the newly enriched soil a final watering, and headed inside. Mosquito bite on her arm had faded from her attention, though she'd scratched it several more times while working. After a quick shower and dinner with Maya, Lisa fell into bed exhausted but satisfied. The garden was ready for the growing season, a living tribute to Grace and a source of nourishment for the months ahead. The first sign that something was wrong came 3 days later. What had started as a simple mosquito bite had evolved into an angry red patch, hot to the touch and tender. Lisa noticed it while changing into her scrubs for the morning shift. Just a reaction to the bite, she told herself, applying a dab of antibiotic ointment before heading to work. Nurses made the worst patients, as the saying went, and Lisa was no exception. She'd worked through colds, backaches, and even a suspected fractured wrist once. A mosquito bite, even an infected one, wasn't going to slow her down. By lunchtime, the irritation had grown. Redness had spread outward in a mottled pattern, and the center of the bite felt unusually firm. Lisa discreetly examined it in the staff bathroom, pressing gently around the edges and wincing at the tenderness. "That's quite a bite," remarked Janet, a fellow nurse, catching a glimpse as she washed her hands. "Might want to have Dr. Rodriguez take a look." "It's nothing," Lisa insisted. "Probably just sensitive skin reacting to those new mosquitoes. They're always worst in spring." Janet raised an eyebrow. "If one of your patients came in with that, what would you tell them?" Lisa sighed. "To keep it clean and watch for signs of infection, which I am doing." She pulled her sleeve down decisively. "I've got 2 more rounds before my shift ends." That evening, the itching intensified. While helping Maya with homework at the kitchen table, Lisa found herself constantly scratching, unable to ignore the persistent irritation. The area had darkened slightly, taking on a purplish tinge around the edges. "Mom, that looks bad," Maya commented, looking up from her textbook. "Like really bad. It's just a bite," Lisa said, though doubt had begun to creep in. In her 15 years of nursing, she'd seen simple infections turn serious when ignored. "I'll put some more antibiotic cream on it before bed." That night, Lisa dreamed of her mother. Grace stood in the garden, looking younger than Lisa had ever known her, digging in soil that seemed to move of its own accord. "You need to pay attention, Lisa," Dream Grace said, her voice urgent but distant. "The earth has secrets. Some heal, some harm." Lisa woke in the darkness, her arm throbbing. The dream lingered as she stumbled to the bathroom and switched on the light. The reflection that greeted her brought a gasp. The bite area had expanded dramatically, now covering most of her forearm in an angry, swollen mass. More alarming was the distinct darkening at the center, a bluish-purple discoloration she recognized from her medical training as a potential sign of tissue death. "It's fine," she whispered to herself, though she knew it wasn't. "I'll go in early tomorrow and have someone look at it." The thought of admitting she'd neglected her own medical care was almost as painful as the arm itself. Pride, Grace used to say, was the Chen family's besetting sin. Maya Chen stood before her 11th grade advanced biology class, pointer in hand, her presentation board covered with soil sample photographs and data charts. Her voice, usually quiet in group settings, carried with unusual confidence as she explained her findings. "So, as you can see from these comparative soil analyses, there's a significant variation in bacterial content between standard composted organic matter and the newer quick composting methods being adopted by some local farms." She clicked to the next slide, unaware that her project was about to become frighteningly personal. "The accelerated process reduces composting time from months to weeks, but my research indicates it may not fully neutralize potential pathogens." Professor Wright, the biology teacher, leaned forward with interest. "And what led you to choose this particular topic, Maya?" Maya hesitated, thinking of the hours spent in the school lab after her mother had gone to bed with that increasingly concerning arm. "My mom gardens organically. I wanted to understand the science behind what makes safe compost." As the bell rang and students filed out, Professor Wright approached Maya's display. "This is exceptional work, especially the microbial analysis. Have you considered submitting this to the state science fair? The deadline's next week." "Really?" Maya brightened momentarily before worry clouded her features again. "I'd have to ask my mom." "Everything okay at home?" Professor Wright asked, noting her expression. Maya packed her materials carefully. "Mom's got this weird infection on her arm. She says it's fine, but you're concerned," he finished for her. "She's always taking care of everyone else. Sometimes she forgets about herself." Maya zipped her backpack with unnecessary force. "And she's been working in that garden every night with this new compost from Morrison's farm." Professor Wright's eyebrows rose slightly. "Morrison's? That's interesting. I heard they've partnered with BioGrow on some new agricultural methods." "BioGrow?" Maya stopped short. "That's where my dad works." "Small world," Professor Wright replied. "Your father's David Park, right? I believe I read his name in a press release about their innovative composting accelerant." Maya's phone buzzed in her pocket, a text from Jessica asking about homework, but Maya's mind was elsewhere, connecting dots she hadn't previously considered. Her father hadn't mentioned any connection to Morrison's farm during their monthly phone calls. Why would he keep that from her? Lisa's morning had started poorly and was rapidly deteriorating. The alarm had failed to wake her, leaving only 20 minutes to get ready for her shift. The infection site on her arm had grown even more alarming overnight, now a distinct blue-black color at the center, with radiating red streaks extending toward her shoulder. Worse, the area felt strangely spongy to the touch. "It's cellulitis," she muttered to herself, pulling on a long-sleeved uniform top despite the warm spring weather. "Probably need antibiotics." Yet something about the presentation nagged at her professional instincts. The coloration was unusual, and the texture. She was halfway through her first round of patient checks when nurse manager Janet cornered her at the medication cart. "Lisa Chen, you're pale as a ghost and sweating bullets. What's going on?" "Just running behind this morning," Lisa deflected, adjusting her sleeve to ensure the infection remained hidden. Janet crossed her arms. 15 years working together, and you think I can't tell when something's wrong? Show me your arm." "My arm? What are you talking about?" Lisa attempted innocence, but Janet's unwavering stare broke her resolve. Slowly, she pushed up her sleeve, revealing the angry infection. Janet's sharp intake of breath said everything. "Hospital policy. You're now a patient, not a nurse. I'm paging Dr. Rodriguez immediately." Within an hour, Lisa found herself in the humiliating position of sitting on an examination table in her own workplace, arm extended as Dr. Rodriguez, an infectious disease specialist, examined the spreading infection. "How long has it been like this?" she asked, gently palpating the edges of the discoloration. "It started as a mosquito bite about 4 days ago," Lisa admitted. "I thought it was just an allergic reaction at first." "And you've been gardening?" Dr. Rodriguez asked, noting the traces of soil still embedded beneath her fingernails despite her morning shower. "Yes, preparing the spring beds, using organic methods, compost from Morrison's farm." Lisa winced as she touched a particularly tender spot. Dr. Rodriguez frowned. "I'm concerned about the appearance and progression. This isn't typical cellulitis. I'm going to start you on broad-spectrum antibiotics while we run some cultures." "Can I finish my shift first?" Lisa asked, already knowing the answer. "Absolutely not. In fact, I'm considering admission for IV antibiotics and monitoring." The word admission struck Lisa like a physical blow. She couldn't be hospitalized. Maya needed her. The garden needed tending. She had shifts scheduled for the next 5 days. "That's unnecessary," she protested. "I can take oral antibiotics at home and monitor the progression myself, Doctor." Rodriguez's expression softened. "Lisa, if one of your patients presented with this infection, what would you recommend?" The same question Janet had asked earlier. Lisa sighed in defeat. "Admission for IV antibiotics and close monitoring." Maya's last class of the day was interrupted by a call to the office. Finding Janet waiting for her sent a chill through her body before the nurse even spoke. "Your mom's okay," Janet began, which only confirmed that something was indeed wrong. But she's been admitted to Willowbrook Medical for an infection. She asked me to pick you up. The drive to the hospital was tense, with Maya peppering Janet with questions the nurse couldn't fully answer. It's an unusual infection in her arm. Dr. Rodriguez is treating it aggressively. Your mom's going to be fine. He's just being stubborn as usual. But Maya could tell from Janet's tight grip on the steering wheel that the situation was more serious than she was letting on at the hospital. Maya found her mother looking smaller somehow in the hospital bed, an IV line delivering antibiotics into her unaffected arm. The infected arm lay exposed atop the covers, now wrapped in gauze with a small window cut out to allow monitoring of the wound site. It's not as bad as it looks, Lisa assured her, though her pallor and the lines of pain around her eyes told a different story. Just a precaution. Maya set her backpack down heavily. Mom, I need to tell you something about my science project. I've been studying bacterial growth in different composting methods, and there might be a connection to Morrison's farm. Lisa's eyes narrowed. What kind of connection? They're using some new accelerated composting process developed by BioGrow. Maya paused, watching her mother's face. Dad's company. Your father's involved with Morrison's farm. Lisa's surprise seemed genuine. Apparently they're testing some new composting accelerant. Professor Wright mentioned it after my presentation. Maya pulled out her laptop. I've been researching it all afternoon. The accelerant breaks down organic material faster, but there's almost no peer-reviewed research on its safety profile. Lisa attempted to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement jostled her arm. Maya, this is just a bacterial infection from a mosquito bite. It happens. But what if it's not just any bacteria? Maya persisted, turning her computer screen to show a research paper. What if it's something specific to improperly composted organic matter? Look at these case studies. Before Lisa could respond, Dr. Rodriguez entered with a concerned expression and a tablet displaying test results. Lisa, the preliminary cultures are showing something unexpected. We're seeing Clostridium perfringens, which is unusual for a simple mosquito bite infection. Maya's head snapped up. Clostridium perfringens. That's one of the bacteria I found elevated in Morrison's new compost. Dr. Rodriguez looked between mother and daughter with newfound interest. Maya, what exactly have you been researching? As Maya explained her science project findings, Lisa's medical mind began connecting the dots. The mosquito bite had merely been the entry point. The bacteria from the incompletely composted organic matter, driven deep into her skin by her own scratching fingernails, had found the perfect breeding ground. Dr. Rodriguez's pager beeped, interrupting the conversation. I need to check on another patient, but I want to hear more about this research. In the meantime, Lisa, we're changing your antibiotic regimen based on these results. After she left, mother and daughter sat in stunned silence until Maya finally spoke. I'm calling Dad. Maya, don't, Lisa began, but her daughter was already dialing. He needs to know what his company's product might be doing, Maya insisted, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and determination. David Park answered on the third ring, his voice warm with surprise at hearing from his daughter outside their scheduled calls. Maya, everything okay, sweetheart? Dad, Mom's in the hospital with an infection from bacteria that might be connected to a BioGrow product, Maya blurted without preamble. And I need you to tell me everything you know about the composting accelerant being tested at Morrison's farm. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before David responded, his voice suddenly tight. I'll be there first thing tomorrow morning. Night settled over Willowbrook Medical like a heavy blanket, the hushed corridors punctuated only by the soft squeak of nurses' shoes and the steady beeping of monitoring equipment. Lisa drifted in and out of consciousness, the powerful antibiotics making her thoughts swim in and out of focus. In her more lucid moments, she stared at the ceiling tiles, counting them again and again, as if the numbers might somehow change. Maya had finally been convinced to go home with Janet around midnight, though the girl had put up a remarkable fight for someone usually so compliant. "I'll be right back in the morning," she'd promised, squeezing Lisa's good hand, "before Dad gets here." The mention of David's impending arrival sent another wave of anxiety through Lisa's already overtaxed system. During one of her wakeful periods, Lisa carefully peeled back the edge of her bandage, needing to see for herself what was happening beneath. The sight nearly made her retch. The center of the infection had darkened further, now an unnatural blue-black color with a waxy appearance. Worse, the edges of healthy skin seemed to be pulling away, creating a distinct border between damaged and undamaged tissue. Her professional knowledge provided unwelcome clarity. Necrotizing fasciitis was a possibility. Deadly flesh-eating infection that could spread with terrifying speed. As she gingerly replaced the bandage, a memory surfaced. Grace in her garden 5 years ago, showing Lisa how to properly compost. "Patience is the secret ingredient," her mother had insisted. "Rush nature and you pay the price." Had Morrison's new method rushed a process that couldn't safely be accelerated, the night nurse, Patricia, appeared with another dose of pain medication. "How are we doing, Lisa? Need anything?" "Just answers," Lisa murmured, but accepted the medication gratefully. As Patricia adjusted the IV, Lisa asked, "Have you ever seen an infection like this before?" Patricia hesitated, her professional mask slipping momentarily. "Not exactly like this, no. But Dr. Rodriguez is consulting with specialists. Try to rest." Rest came in fitful bursts, interrupted by fever dreams where Lisa stood in her garden, while the soil beneath her feet writhed and shifted. In these dreams, Grace appeared, always just out of reach, trying to tell her something important that Lisa couldn't quite hear. Dawn broke with no improvement. If anything, the pain had intensified despite the medication, and Lisa's arm felt strangely heavy, as if disconnected from her body. Dr. Rodriguez arrived early, accompanied by Dr. Thomas Barnes, a surgeon Lisa knew by reputation rather than personally. "We need to discuss next steps," Dr. Rodriguez began, his usual confident demeanor subdued. "The infection isn't responding to the antibiotics as well as we'd hoped." Dr. Barnes stepped forward, his weathered face grave. "Lisa, I specialize in necrotizing soft tissue infections. I'd like to examine your arm if that's all right." Lisa nodded, her nurse's training helping her maintain composure even as the patient part of her brain screamed in panic. Dr. Barnes worked with methodical precision, removing the bandage completely and examining every inch of the affected area. His expression remained neutral, but Lisa caught the subtle widening of his eyes when he gently pressed on the outer edge of the infection. "Did you hear that?" he asked Dr. Rodriguez. Rodriguez leaned closer. "Hear what?" "Let me try again." Dr. Barnes pressed once more, and this time Lisa heard it too. A faint crackling sound like someone scrunching cellophane. The sound seemed to emanate from beneath her skin. "Subcutaneous emphysema," Dr. Barnes said quietly. "Gas production in the tissues." The term hung in the air like a death sentence. Lisa knew what it meant. The bacteria were not only destroying tissue, but producing gas as they multiplied. It explained the strange, puffy texture of her skin and confirmed her worst fears about the infection's nature. "We need to take you to surgery," Dr. Barnes said, meeting Lisa's eyes directly. "Immediately. This type of infection can spread rapidly, and we need to debride the affected tissue before it progresses further." "How much tissue?" Lisa asked, her mouth dry. Dr. Barnes didn't sugarcoat it. I won't know until I'm in there. Best case, we remove only the immediately affected area. Worst case, he didn't need to finish. They both knew the worst case could mean amputation. My daughter, Lisa managed. She'll be here soon. I need to see her before surgery. We'll try to wait, Dr. Rodriguez assured her. But Lisa, this can't wait long. Every hour increases the risk. Maya arrived at the hospital just after 7, having barely slept. She'd spent most of the night researching Clostridium perfringens infections, each article more terrifying than the last. Bacteria, commonly found in soil and animal intestines, was usually harmless unless it entered deep tissue wounds. There, especially in low oxygen environments, it could cause gas gangrene, a rapidly progressing and potentially fatal condition. She found her mother pale and drawn, the gravity of the situation evident in her eyes. They want to do surgery, Lisa explained, trying to keep her voice steady for her daughter's sake. To clean out the infected tissue. Maya sank into the chair beside the bed. How bad is it? It's serious, Lisa admitted, but Dr. Barnes is very experienced with these types of infections. Is it? Maya hesitated, afraid to give voice to her late-night research findings. Is it gas gangrene? Lisa's slight nod was answer enough. How did you know that term? She asked softly. I researched Clostridium perfringens last night. Maya pulled out her notebook, filled with scribbled notes and printed research pages. Mom, this bacteria is commonly found in improperly composted organic matter. If Morrison's new method doesn't reach high enough temperatures or maintain them long enough, it wouldn't kill these bacteria. Lisa closed her eyes briefly. Maya, I need you to listen carefully. If I go into surgery and things don't go well. Don't say that, Maya interrupted, suddenly looking much younger than her 16 years. I have to say it, Lisa insisted gently. If things don't go well, the house and everything in it goes to you. There's insurance money and grandma's savings that I never touched. Aunt Rachel will be your guardian until you're 18. We arranged that after Grandma died. Maya's eyes welled with tears. You're coming out of surgery fine. You have to. A gentle knock at the door prevented Lisa's response. David Park stood awkwardly in the doorway, looking both familiar and like a stranger after months without seeing him in person. His business suit seemed out of place in the hospital setting, his normally confident posture diminished by uncertainty. David, Lisa acknowledged, suddenly conscious of how she must look. Pale, disheveled, and clearly very ill. Lisa, he stepped into the room, eyes widening at the sight of her bandaged arm and the IV lines. Maya called me last night. I came as soon as I could. An uncomfortable silence descended, broken only when Dr. Barnes returned with the surgical consent forms. Ms. Chen, we need to prep you for surgery within the hour. David looked between the doctor and his ex-wife. Surgery. Maya mentioned an infection, but it's progressing rapidly, Dr. Barnes explained. We need to remove the infected tissue before it spreads further. What kind of infection does this? David asked, his question directed at no one in particular. Maya stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. The kind caused by bacteria from incompletely composted organic matter. The kind your company's new accelerant might be enabling. David's face drained of color. What are you talking about? Morrison's farm is using BioGrow's new composting accelerant, isn't it? Maya demanded. The one you've been developing in your lab for the past year. Yes, but what, Dad? Did you test it properly? Did you make sure it kills pathogens like Clostridium perfringens? Because Mom's garden is full of compost treated with it, and now she's going into surgery that might cost her her arm, or worse. Maya, Lisa called softly, this isn't helping right now. The tension was interrupted by the arrival of the surgical team. We need to take her now, the head nurse announced, already beginning to prepare Lisa's bed for transport. Lisa reached for Maya's hand. "I love you, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay." She turned to David, her expression softening slightly. "Take care of her while I'm in surgery. Don't let her sit alone." As they wheeled Lisa toward the operating room, Maya's composure finally broke. She collapsed into sobs against her father's chest, years of stoic independence crumbling in the face of potential loss. David held her awkwardly at first, then more securely, his own eyes damp. "She'll be okay," he murmured into his daughter's hair. "Mother's the strongest person I've ever known." The surgical waiting room became their prison for the next 4 hours. Maya alternated between pacing and sitting rigidly in the uncomfortable chairs, while David made a series of increasingly tense phone calls to his colleagues at BioGrow. "I need every piece of research data on the composting accelerant," he demanded into his phone, voice low but intense. "Every test result, every safety analysis. Yes, right now. This is potentially very serious." Between calls, David tried to engage with Maya, but the girl remained distant, her anger and fear creating an almost visible barrier between them. "Your science project," he said finally, grasping for common ground. "Tell me more about what you found." Maya hesitated, then reached for her backpack. "I compared bacterial content in traditional compost versus the accelerated stuff. The accelerated samples showed significantly higher levels of potentially harmful bacteria, including Clostridium perfringens." She handed him several printouts of microscope images labeled with dates and sample sources. "The traditional compost reaches higher temperatures during decomposition and maintains them longer, which kills more pathogens. The accelerated process doesn't get as hot or stay hot long enough." David studied the images, his expression growing increasingly troubled. "Did you submit these findings anywhere?" "Just my science teacher," Maya replied. "He wanted me to enter them in the state science fair." David ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar that Maya felt an unexpected pang of nostalgia. "Maya, if you're right about this, if there's a connection between our accelerant and what's happening to your mother, then your company is responsible," Maya finished flatly. "It's more complicated than that," David began, but was interrupted by Dr. Barnes' appearance in the waiting room doorway. They both stood immediately, Maya clutching her father's arm without realizing it. "Doctor." Barnes looked exhausted, the surgical mask marks still visible on his face. "She's in recovery," he said without preamble. "We were able to remove the infected tissue without amputation, but it was extensive. The infection had spread deeper than we initially thought." Relief flooded through Maya so intensely that her knees nearly buckled. "So she's going to be okay, doctor?" Barnes' hesitation was brief but noticeable. "The next 24 to 48 hours will be critical. We've changed her antibiotic regimen based on cultures taken during surgery, but this type of infection can be persistent. She'll need additional surgeries for skin grafting once we're certain the infection is controlled." "Can we see her?" David asked. "She'll be in recovery for another hour, then moved to ICU. You can see her briefly once she's settled, doctor." Barnes turned to leave, then paused. There was something unusual about this infection. The gas production was more extensive than I've typically seen with Clostridium perfringens, and there was a distinctive odor, almost like rot eggs. Maya and David exchanged glances. "Hydrogen sulfide," Maya said quietly. "It's one of the gases produced by certain strains of Clostridium." Dr. Barnes looked at her with newfound respect. "You've done your homework. Yes, hydrogen sulfide is a possibility, though we won't know for certain until the full laboratory analysis comes back." After the doctor left, David turned to Maya with a determined expression. "I need to see your research, all of it, and then I need to make some more calls." Lisa drifted through layers of consciousness, voices and sensations filtering through the fog of anesthesia and pain medication. Her arm felt simultaneously on fire and strangely absent, as if it existed in some parallel dimension of pure sensation, detached from her body. Through half-open eyes, she glimpsed the sterile white ceiling of the ICU, the rhythmic blinking of monitoring equipment, the hushed movements of medical staff. A memory surfaced. Grace in her hospital bed during her final days, reaching for Lisa's hand with fingers already growing cold. "The garden will help you heal," her mother had whispered. "It always has." But the garden hadn't healed her this time. It had nearly killed her. Lisa forced her eyes open fully, needing to see the damage for herself. Her left arm lay elevated on a pillow, heavily bandaged from fingertips to shoulder. What skin remained visible around the edges of the bandages was an angry red, marked with surgical pen and iodine stains. An IV port delivered clear fluid and medications through her right arm. "You're awake," a nurse, Kelly from pediatrics working an ICU shift, appeared at her bedside. "How's your pain level on a scale of 1 to 10? Lisa tried to speak, but her throat felt raw from the intubation tube. She held up 7 fingers with her right hand. "I'll adjust your medication," Kelly promised, checking the monitors. "Your daughter and ex-husband have been waiting. They can come in for 5 minutes if you feel up to it." Lisa nodded, though the mention of David sent a fresh wave of complicated emotions through her. How much did he know about Morrison's farm and the new composting methods? Had he knowingly put profit above safety? Maya entered first, her face a mixture of relief and horror as she took in her mother's condition. "Mom," she whispered, moving immediately to the uninjured side of the bed. David hung back near the door, his usual confidence nowhere in evidence. "Lisa," he acknowledged, his voice rough with emotion. "You gave us quite a scare." "What happened?" Lisa managed to rasp. "During surgery." Maya and David exchanged glances. "Dr. Barnes had to remove a lot of infected tissue," Maya explained gently. "He said the bacteria had spread through the fascial planes, the full thickness of skin." Lisa translated medical knowledge, filling in the blanks. "How much?" "Most of the forearm," David said quietly. "They'll do skin grafts later, once they're sure the infection is controlled." Lisa closed her eyes briefly, absorbing this news. When she opened them again, her gaze fixed on David. "Morrison's farm," she said, each word an effort. "Your company." David stepped closer to the bed. "Maya showed me her research. I've spent the last 3 hours on the phone with our labs. The composting accelerant was fast-tracked through testing. Some of the safety protocols were abbreviated." "Abbreviated," Lisa repeated, the word tasting bitter on her tongue. "I didn't know," David insisted. "I'm in marketing, not research and development, but I'm finding out everything I can now." Kelly appeared in the doorway. "I'm sorry, but she needs to rest. You can come back later." As Maya leaned down to kiss her mother's forehead, Lisa caught her hand. "Your science project," she whispered. "Keep going. Find answers." Maya nodded, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "I will, Mom, I promise." After they left, Lisa stared at the ceiling, thoughts churning despite the pain medication. The crackling she'd heard when Dr. Barnes pressed on her arm echoed in her memory. Sound that shouldn't come from human flesh. What else was lurking in her garden? In the soil she'd trusted to nourish rather than harm. And how many other gardens in Willowbrook might harbor the same invisible threat? By the 3rd day after surgery, Lisa's condition had stabilized enough for transfer from the ICU to a private room. The heavy fog of pain medication had lifted somewhat, allowing for clearer thinking, but also bringing with it the full, terrible awareness of what had happened to her arm. During the first dressing change that she was fully conscious for, Lisa forced herself to look directly at the wound. A long, angry incision running from her inner elbow to her wrist, bordered by ravaged tissue that no longer resembled skin. Vacuum-assisted closure devices pulled gently, but relentlessly at the wound edges. Their soft hum, a constant reminder of how close she'd come to losing more than just skin and subcutaneous tissue. "The wound vacuum is working well," Dr. Barnes commented as he examined the site. "Granulation tissue is forming, which is exactly what we want to see." Lisa nodded, her professional knowledge providing both comfort and additional terror. She knew exactly what healthy healing should look like and how quickly things could turn if the infection reasserted itself. "Any cultures back from yesterday?" she asked. Dr. Barnes met her eyes directly, respecting her as both patient and fellow medical professional. "Still showing Clostridium perfringens, but the bacterial load is significantly reduced. The targeted antibiotics are working." He hesitated, then added, "There's something unusual about this particular strain, though. The lab is running additional tests." Before Lisa could ask for clarification, a soft knock at the door announced Maya's arrival. The girl had developed a routine over the past days. School until 3, then straight to the hospital until evening, her backpack laden with both homework and her ongoing research materials. "Hi, Mom," Dr. Barnes nodded to Maya, then took her customary seat by the bed, eyes carefully avoiding the exposed wound as the doctor continued his examination. "Your mother's making progress," Dr. Barnes told her with a reassuring smile. "If things continue this way, we'll be looking at skin grafting options by early next week." After he left, Maya unpacked her laptop and a thick folder of papers. "Dad's coming by later with someone from BioGrow's research department," she said, not looking up from her screen. "I think they're finally taking this seriously." Lisa watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and concern. Maya had thrown herself into investigating the connection between the composting accelerant and the infection with a determination that bordered on obsession. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of late nights spent reading scientific papers far beyond typical high school level. "You need to rest too, sweetheart," Lisa said gently. "Your finals are coming up." Maya shook her head. "This is more important. Professor Wright is letting me adapt my science project into an independent study unit. It counts toward my final grade." She finally looked up, her expression intense. "Mom, I found something about hydrogen sulfide production in certain Clostridium strains. If the bacteria in your infection are producing higher than normal levels, it might explain why it progressed so aggressively." Lisa was about to respond when a sudden, sharp pain shot through her arm. Different from the constant throb she'd grown accustomed to. She inhaled sharply, her body tensing. "Mom, what's wrong?" Maya was immediately on her feet. "Just a twinge," Lisa tried to reassure her, but another wave of pain followed, more intense than the first. With it came a sensation she'd felt once before. A subtle shifting beneath the bandages, as if something was moving under her skin. Maya must have seen the alarm in her eyes because she immediately pressed the call button. "Something's wrong," she told the nurse who answered. "My mom's in pain." The nurse arrived within moments, quickly assessing Lisa's vital signs. On a scale of 1 to 10. 8, Lisa admitted, breathing through the pain and increasing. "Something's not right." The nurse paged Dr. Barnes, who appeared with remarkable speed. As he carefully removed the vacuum dressing, the reason for Lisa's sudden pain became horrifyingly apparent. The wound edges, which had been showing signs of healthy granulation just hours earlier, were now darkening again, with an ominous bluish tint spreading outward. But worse was the sound. That terrible crackling noise, audible even without pressure, like bubble wrap being popped beneath her skin. "The infection's recurring," Dr. Barnes said, his calm voice belied by the urgency in his movements as he called for assistance. "We need to get you back to surgery immediately." Maya stood frozen by the bed, her young face a mask of terror. "But you said the antibiotics were working." Sometimes these infections can become resistant, or there might be a secondary infection developing, Dr. Barnes explained as the room filled with medical personnel preparing for emergency surgery. Maya, I need you to wait outside now. No, Maya grabbed her mother's right hand. I'm not leaving her. Maya, Lisa managed through gritted teeth, the pain now radiating up to her shoulder. Call your father. Tell him what's happening. As they wheeled Lisa toward the operating room for the second time, the last thing she saw was her daughter standing alone in the hallway, phone clutched in trembling hands, looking suddenly much younger than her 16 years. The surgical waiting room had become too familiar. Every outdated magazine, every uncomfortable chair, every flickering fluorescent light now seared into Maya's memory. This time, however, she wasn't alone. David had arrived within 20 minutes of her call, still wearing his office clothes, tie loosened and hair disheveled from running his hands through it in agitation. Beside him sat Dr. Rebecca Walsh, BioGrow's head of biological research, whom David had been meeting with when Maya called. Unlike David's rumpled appearance, Dr. Walsh maintained a crisp professionalism, though her deeply furrowed brow betrayed her concern. Tell me again exactly what you saw, Dr. Walsh asked Maya, opening a notebook. Maya described the scene in clinical detail, her voice flat with the effort of containing her emotions. The skin was turning blue-black again, and there was that crackling sound like bubble wrap under her skin. Dr. Walsh nodded grimly. Subcutaneous emphysema, gas trapped under the skin typical with Clostridium infections. But the rapid recurrence after debridement and targeted antibiotics is troubling. Troubling, Maya's voice rose. My mother could die, and you call it troubling. David placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. Maya, no, she shrugged away his touch. Both of you work for the company whose product might be killing her. How can you be so clinical about this, doctor? Walsh met Maya's anger with steady calm. Because clinical analysis is how we solve this. Your research and observations have already provided valuable information. The soil samples you collected from your garden show unusually high concentrations of a particular Clostridium strain, which you would have found in your own testing if you'd done it properly, Maya shot back. To Maya's surprise, Dr. Walsh didn't disagree. You're right. Our accelerated testing protocols were insufficient. We tested for common pathogens, but missed this particular variant because it only becomes problematic under specific conditions. David leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Dr. Walsh has been reviewing all the data since I brought your research to her attention. She's been working with our labs around the clock. Maya was unmoved. And meanwhile, Mom's having emergency surgery because your product put bacteria in our garden that's literally eating her alive. The harsh words hung in the air between them, neither adult attempting to soften the brutal truth. Finally, Dr. Walsh spoke. Maya, I need to ask you something important. You mentioned that your mother uses organic gardening methods. She ever use copper-based fungicides or treatments in her garden? The question seemed so tangential that Maya almost didn't answer. No, Mom doesn't believe in fungicides at all. She uses companion planting and natural remedies. What about the water source for the garden? Municipal water or well water? Well water, Maya replied, confusion momentarily overtaking anger. Grandma had a well dug years ago specifically for the garden. She said city water had too many chemicals. Dr. Walsh made a note, her expression sharpening. Has the well water ever been tested for mineral content? I don't know. Why does that matter? Because, Dr. Walsh said, looking up from her notes, certain mineral compositions, particularly those high in sulfur compounds, can create ideal conditions for this Clostridium variant to produce higher levels of hydrogen sulfide gas. Combined with our accelerant, which alters the decomposition process. It could create a perfect storm. Unique combination of factors that wouldn't have shown up in standard testing, David finished, the color draining from his face, but could explain the unusual virulence and gas production we're seeing in your mother's infection. Maya processed this information, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her fear and anger. So it's not just the accelerant, but the interaction between the accelerant, the bacteria, and our specific well-water chemistry. That's my working hypothesis, Dr. Walsh confirmed. If I'm right, this isn't happening with most users of our product, but could potentially affect others with similar water chemistry who use the treated compost in open wounds. How many people could be at risk? David asked. That's what we need to find out, Dr. Walsh replied gravely. I've already initiated a review of water testing data from every region where the accelerant is being used. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of Dr. Barnes, still in surgical scrubs, his expression grim. Maya stood immediately, heart hammering against her ribs. The infection has spread more aggressively than we anticipated, he said without preamble. We've removed all visibly affected tissue, but given the rapid recurrence despite appropriate antibiotics, we're facing a difficult decision. What decision? David asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Dr. Barnes met his gaze directly. Whether to amputate the arm to prevent further spread, the infection is moving rapidly toward the shoulder joint. If it crosses that boundary, it could become systemic. The word amputate hit Maya like a physical blow. She swayed slightly, grateful when her father's arm steadied her. But there has to be another option, she protested. Mom's a nurse. She needs both hands. Trying high-dose, multiple antibiotic therapy and hyperbaric oxygen treatments, Dr. Barnes assured her. But I need you both to understand the severity of the situation. This infection isn't responding normally. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. Doctor, I'm Dr. Rebecca Walsh from BioGrow Industries. We believe we may have identified a contributing factor to the unusual virulence of this infection. May I speak with you privately? While the two doctors conferred in the hallway, Maya sank back into her chair, the full weight of the situation pressing down on her. They're going to take her arm, she whispered. David knelt before her, taking both her hands in his. Listen to me, Maya. Your mother is the strongest person I've ever known. Even if the worst happens and we don't know that it will, she'll adapt, and we'll be there to help her. We, Maya repeated skeptically. You haven't been with us for 5 years. Pain flashed across David's face, but he didn't back down. I know I haven't been the father you deserved, the husband your mother deserved, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere, no matter what happens. Before Maya could respond, Dr. Barnes and Dr. Walsh returned. We're going to try something, Dr. Barnes said. Dr. Walsh has suggested a treatment protocol that's shown promise with similar infections in laboratory settings. It's experimental, but given the circumstances. What kind of treatment? David asked. A combination approach, Dr. Walsh explained. Targeted antibiotics paired with an enzyme inhibitor that specifically disrupts the bacteria's ability to produce hydrogen sulfide. It's not been used in this exact scenario before, but the underlying science is sound. And if it doesn't work, Maya voiced the question no one wanted to ask Dr. Barnes' expression was somber. Then we proceed with amputation within the next 12 hours. We don't have the luxury of time with this infection. As the gravity of the situation settled over them, the crackling sound echoed in Maya's memory. That horrible, unnatural noise from beneath her mother's skin. A sound that shouldn't come from human flesh. A sound that might be the precursor to a loss that would change her mother's life forever. Do whatever you have to do, she said finally, her young voice steady with a maturity beyond her years. Just save her. Willowbrook Community High School buzzed with the usual end-of-year energy. Seniors counting down to graduation, underclassmen making summer plans, teachers assigning final projects. In the midst of this normal teenage ecosystem, Maya moved like a ghost, physically present, but emotionally elsewhere. Hallways that had once felt so important now seemed trivial. The dramas and triumphs of high school life rendered meaningless by the sterile hospital room where her mother fought for more than just her arm. "Maya, did you hear the question?" Professor Wright's voice cut through her fog. 24 pairs of eyes turned toward her, some curious, others sympathetic. Word had spread quickly in the small town. Lisa Chen, the nurse everyone knew and respected, was critically ill with a mysterious infection. Some versions of the story were close to accurate. Others had morphed into wild speculation. "I'm sorry," Maya mumbled. "Could you repeat it?" Professor Wright approached her desk, lowering his voice. "Perhaps you'd like to take a break. The guidance office is available." "I'm fine," Maya insisted, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She'd insisted on coming to school despite David's objections. Sitting at home while waiting for news was unbearable. At least here she could pretend normalcy for a few hours. The bell rang, saving her from further scrutiny. As students filed out, Jessica Wallace, Maya's closest friend since elementary school, lingered behind. "Any updates?" Jessica asked, falling into step beside Maya. "They're trying some experimental treatment," Maya replied, navigating through the crowded hallway toward her locker. "If it doesn't work by tonight, they'll—" The word amputate stuck in her throat. Jessica squeezed her arm. "Your mom's tough. Everyone says so." "Yeah." Maya managed a weak smile as they reached her locker. As she spun the combination, a small group of senior boys passed by. One of them, Ryan Morrison, whose family owned Morrison's farm, glancing her way uncomfortably before hurrying past. Jessica noticed the exchange. "What's his problem?" "His family's farm supplied the compost that infected my mom," Maya said flatly. "His dad's been calling hours nonstop, terrified we're going to sue." "Are you?" Maya slammed her locker shut with unexpected force. "I don't know. Dad's talking to lawyers, but that's not what matters right now." The rest of the school day passed in a blur. During lunch, Maya sat alone in the library, reviewing her research notes and the information Dr. Walsh had shared. The interaction between BioGrow's accelerant, the specific Clostridium strain, and the mineral content of their well water created what Dr. Walsh had called a perfect storm. Conditions that transformed a normally manageable bacteria into something far more dangerous. Her phone vibrated with a text from David. "Meeting with BioGrow executives. We'll pick you up at 3. Dr. Walsh says treatment showing early promise." A fragile hope bloomed in Maya's chest. Maybe the experimental treatment would work. Maybe her mother would keep her arm. Maybe life could somehow return to normal. That hope sustained her through her final class, only to be crushed when she spotted David waiting in the school parking lot, his expression grave. She knew before she even reached the car. "It's not working, is it?" she asked, sliding into the passenger seat. David started the engine before answering. "The infection is still spreading, though more slowly. Dr. Barnes wants to proceed with the amputation this evening." Maya stared straight ahead, her vision blurring. "Does Mom know?" Yes, she made the decision herself. Of course she had. Lisa Chen had always faced difficult choices head-on, making the practical decision even when it broke her heart. How many times had Maya heard her mother say, "We deal with what is, not what we wish would be." The company executives want to meet with us, David continued, navigating toward the hospital. They're prepared to cover all medical expenses, rehabilitation costs, any necessary home modifications, and compensation for. Buying us off, Maya interrupted, anger flaring hot and sudden. Paying us to keep quiet about what their product did. David gripped the steering wheel tighter. It's more complicated than that. They're acknowledging responsibility while trying to prevent a public panic. The accelerant has been pulled from the market pending further testing. What about everyone else who bought Morrison's compost? Are they warning them? They're developing a response plan. Dr. Walsh is coordinating water testing in areas where the product was distributed. Maya turned to stare out the window, watching familiar Willowbrook storefronts pass by. The town had always felt so safe, so predictable. Now danger lurked in something as innocent as garden soil. It's not enough, she said finally. People need to know the risks, David sighed. Maya, there are legal considerations, potential economic impacts on the community. Morrison's farm employs dozens of local families. If they go under because of this, I don't care, Maya's voice rose sharply. Mom is losing her arm because someone cut corners on safety testing, because profit was more important than people's lives. The accusation hung between them, David's silence an acknowledgement of its truth. He had been part of that system, part of a company that prioritized market share over meticulous safety protocols. His daughter's righteous anger was entirely justified. They reached the hospital in strained silence. In the parking lot, David turned to her before they exited the car. Maya, I want you to know something. Whatever happens with BioGrow, with Morrison's farm, with any lawsuits or settlements, none of that matters to me compared to you and your mother. I've made a lot of mistakes, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Maya studied her father's face, the lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered, his expression raw with sincerity. Mom's going to need a lot of help, she said finally, with everything. I know, David nodded, throat working visibly. And so will I. Lisa lay in her hospital bed, right hand resting on top of the blanket, left arm still attached, but not for much longer, positioned carefully on a pillow beside her. The experimental treatment had slowed the infection's progression, but failed to stop it. The decision had been made, papers had been signed. In 3 hours, surgeons would amputate her left arm just below the shoulder joint. She'd asked for some time alone before the pre-surgical preparations began, needing to process what was happening without the well-meaning concern of others. 15 years as a nurse had taught Lisa that bodies were fundamentally fragile, that life could change in an instant, that adaptability was more important than perfection. She counseled countless patients through life-altering diagnoses and procedures. Now she was the patient, and all her professional knowledge felt woefully inadequate in the face of personal loss. Lisa looked at her left hand, the hand that had checked countless pulses, administered medications, comforted the dying, and tended her beloved garden. Soon it would be gone, along with her forearm, elbow, and most of her upper arm. The infection had spread too far, too fast, defying even the experimental treatment Dr. Walsh had proposed. A memory surfaced. Grace in her final days, frail but still teaching her daughter. The body is just a vessel, Lisa, she'd said. What matters is the life you fill it with. At the time, Lisa had dismissed it as the kind of philosophical musing that comes with facing mortality. Now the words returned with new significance. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Barnes entered, carrying her chart and wearing the gentle expression he reserved for difficult conversations. How are you feeling, Lisa? He asked, though they both knew the question was largely ceremonial. Like someone about to lose an arm, she replied with dark humor. Has Maya arrived yet? She's with her father in the waiting area. They'll come in shortly. He hesitated. Before they do, there's something I wanted to discuss privately. The latest culture results came back with some unusual findings. Lisa straightened slightly. What kind of findings? The Clostridium strain in your infection shows signs of genetic adaptation. It's developed mechanisms to resist multiple antibiotics simultaneously, which explains why our treatments have been ineffective. He paused. Dr. Walsh believes it may be related to the interaction between the composting accelerant and environmental factors specific to your garden. My well water, Lisa said, recalling Maya's explanation of their working theory. The sulfur content, Dr. Barnes nodded. Precisely. In the presence of those specific minerals and the chemical compounds in the accelerant, the bacteria appears to have evolved, for lack of a better term, become more virulent, more resistant, more aggressive in its tissue destruction. Is this likely to happen to others using the same compost? The nurse in Lisa immediately thought of community safety, even as she faced her own crisis. That's what Dr. Walsh and her team are trying to determine. The combination of factors in your case may be unique, but they're testing samples from other locations to be certain. He met her eyes directly. Lisa, what happened to you may be the warning that prevents this from happening to others. A small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Lisa nodded slowly. Make sure Maya knows that. She'll need to find some meaning in all this. Of course. Dr. Barnes checked his watch. The surgical team will be preparing you in about 45 minutes. Your family can stay with you until then. After he left, Lisa turned her gaze toward the window, where late afternoon sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds. Outside, spring continued its relentless progress. Flowers blooming, trees leafing out, gardens growing. Her garden, with its hidden danger, would need to be completely removed, the soil tested and possibly replaced. The thought brought a surprising pang of grief, almost as sharp as the loss of her arm. That garden had been her connection to grace, to the earth, to the cycles of growth and renewal that had sustained her through divorce and loss. Now it had betrayed her in the most profound way, harboring microscopic killers that had turned her own love of nurturing against her. The irony was almost too perfect. The nurse infected while caring. The gardener poisoned by her garden. Lisa closed her eyes against sudden tears. She would survive this. She would adapt. But first, she needed to mourn. For her arm, for her garden, for the life she had known that was ending today on the operating table. The Willowbrook Medical Center cafeteria offered little comfort at 2 in the morning. Its harsh fluorescent lighting and scent of industrial cleaning products creating an atmosphere of sterile limbo. David sat alone at a corner table, staring into a styrofoam cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. Maya had finally fallen asleep in the surgical waiting room, curled uncomfortably in a vinyl chair, her face marked with dried tears. He hadn't had the heart to wake her when he slipped away, needing space to process the events of the past 24 hours. Lisa had emerged from surgery 6 hours earlier. The procedure had gone as well as could be expected, the surgeon's cautious phrasing doing little to soften the reality that his ex-wife was now missing her left arm. Infection had been even more extensive than initially thought, requiring amputation at the shoulder joint rather than below it, eliminating any possibility of a prosthetic that could attach to an existing portion of the upper arm. David rubbed his eyes, feeling the grit of exhaustion beneath his lids. His phone buzzed, another message from BioGrow's legal team requesting an update and reminding him of the confidentiality agreements under discussion. He ignored it, as he had the previous 4 messages. Corporate damage control seemed insignificant compared to the damage done to Lisa's body and life. Mr. Park. David looked up to find Dr. Barnes standing beside his table, still wearing scrubs beneath his white coat, looking as exhausted as David felt. "May I join you?" David gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Any change in Lisa's condition?" "She's stable. The surgical site looks clean, no signs of residual infection." Dr. Barnes set down his own coffee cup. "But that's not why I'm here. Something's come up that you should know about." David straightened, instantly alert. "What is it?" "About an hour ago, I received a call from Dr. Walsh. She asked me to tell you she's been removed from the investigation." "Removed by whom?" BioGrow executives, apparently. They've assigned a different team to analyze the data and manage the company's response. Dr. Barnes leaned forward, lowering his voice despite the empty cafeteria. "Before she was removed, Dr. Walsh sent me some findings she thought I should see. Findings she believes are being suppressed." David's stomach tightened. He'd worked for BioGrow long enough to recognize the signs of corporate maneuvering. "What kind of findings?" "The composting accelerant your company developed. It was never properly tested for interaction with sulfur-rich environments. Dr. Walsh found internal memos dating back 18 months, highlighting potential concerns, but recommending abbreviated testing protocols to meet market deadlines." Implication hung in the air between them. David had been part of those marketing deadlines, pushing for faster development to beat competitors to market. He'd never questioned the testing protocols, trusting that the scientific team was being thorough. Or had he simply chosen not to ask the hard questions? "There's more," Dr. Barnes continued. "Morrison's farm wasn't the first distribution point to report unusual bacterial activity in treated compost. There were at least 3 other reports from different regions, all dismissed as user error or contamination from other sources." "This," David muttered, his professional world collapsing around him. "They knew there were problems. Dr. Walsh believes so, yes. She's concerned that the company's current response, targeted water testing in limited areas, is insufficient given these findings. She wanted you to know because," Dr. Barnes hesitated. "Because I'm inside the company," David finished. "Because I could potentially do something with this information." "Yes, and because she respects what your daughter has done with her research." Maya's work confirmed what Dr. Walsh had begun to suspect. David ran a hand through his hair, mind racing. He'd built his career at BioGrow, risen through the ranks to become marketing director, earned stock options and bonuses in the corner office. All of it now tainted by the knowledge that his company had gambled with public safety, and Lisa had paid the price. "What would you do?" David asked finally. "If you were in my position," Dr. Barnes considered this. "As a doctor, my first obligation is to my patients. Their safety, their well-being. Corporate interests, career considerations, financial implications, those all come second." He stood, placing a flash drive on the table. "Dr. Walsh asked me to give you this. What you do with it is your decision." After the surgeon left, David stared at the small device as if it might burn a hole through the table. It contained information that could potentially save others from Lisa's fate, but using it would certainly end his career and possibly expose him to legal liability. He'd been part of the marketing team that had pushed for faster development, after all. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Maya. "Where are you?" "Mom's awake." Lisa drifted in and out of consciousness, the powerful post-surgical pain medications creating a hazy boundary between dreams and reality. One moment she was in her garden, both arms intact, digging in rich soil. In the next, she was aware of the hospital room, the beeping monitors, and the profound emptiness on her left side. During one period of clarity, she became aware of Maya sitting beside her bed, laptop open, furiously typing. "What are you working on?" Lisa asked, her voice scratchy from the intubation tube. Maya startled, quickly setting the computer aside. Mom, you're awake. How do you feel? Do you need anything? Could I call the nurse? Just water, Lisa requested, smiling weakly at her daughter's nervous energy. As Maya held the cup and straw for her, Lisa noticed the dark circles under the girl's eyes, the tension in her young shoulders. You should go home, get some real sleep, she murmured after drinking. I'm not leaving you, Maya declared with typical teenage absolutism. Dad's here too. He just went to get coffee. The mention of David sent a complicated wave of emotions through Lisa. Their relationship had been cordial but distant since the divorce, limited to discussions about Maya and brief exchanges during drop-offs and pickups. Now circumstances had thrust him back into the center of her life at its most vulnerable point. Your project, Lisa said, nodding toward the laptop. You're still working on it, Maya hesitated. It's evolved. Dr. Walsh shared some information with me before the company pulled her from the investigation. I'm compiling everything. I research her findings, the hospital's culture results. Maya, Lisa began, caution in her voice. People need to know, Mom, Maya interrupted, a fierce determination in her eyes. Not just about our situation, but about the pattern. There have been other cases, not as severe as yours, but similar bacterial overgrowth in gardens using the accelerated compost. BioGrow knew there were problems, and they kept selling it anyway. The door opened before Lisa could respond, admitting David and unexpectedly Dr. Walsh herself. The researcher looked harried, her professional appearance rumpled as if she'd been awake for days. Dr. Walsh, Maya exclaimed. I thought they removed you from the case. They did, the scientist confirmed grimly. I've been placed on administrative leave pending review, but I couldn't just. She glanced at David, who nodded for her to continue. I couldn't let them bury this. Not when there could be others at risk. David approached Lisa's bedside, his expression a mixture of guilt, determination, and something else. A resolve she hadn't seen in him for years. Lisa, I owe you an apology, a bigger one than I can possibly express. My company, the company I've defended and promoted, they cut corners. They ignored warnings, and you paid the price. Lisa studied her ex-husband's face. You didn't know, she said softly. I didn't ask, he corrected her. I didn't want to know. I was focused on marketing timelines and product launches. I never questioned whether we were doing enough testing. He pulled the flash drive from his pocket. But now I know, and I have to decide what to do with that knowledge. Dr. Walsh stepped forward. The data is clear. The accelerant creates conditions that can transform normal soil bacteria into something far more dangerous, especially in areas with specific water chemistry profiles. Willowbrook isn't the only community with sulfur-rich well water. There could be gardens all over the region harboring potentially dangerous bacterial concentrations. And your company is covering this up, Lisa asked, professional outrage temporarily overriding her personal situation. They're limiting the scope of the investigation and the recall, Dr. Walsh confirmed. The official position is that your case was a perfect storm of unusual factors, unlikely to be replicated elsewhere. You don't believe that, Maya stated. The data suggests otherwise. We've already identified 3 other communities with similar water profiles where the product was distributed. No reported infections yet, but the bacterial samples from those areas show concerning patterns. Lisa shifted in the bed, wincing as the movement sent pain radiating from her surgical site. So what happens now? David took a deep breath. That's what I've been struggling with. If I go public with this information, it ends my career, possibly worse, given the confidentiality agreements I've signed. But if I don't, he looked at the empty space where Lisa's left arm should be. It shouldn't be just your decision, Maya said suddenly. This affects all of us, Mom most of all. The room fell silent as 3 pairs of eyes turned to Lisa. Despite the medication, despite the shock and trauma of the past days, her mind was clearing now, professional instincts kicking in. It spent her career advocating for patients, navigating complex health care systems on their behalf. This was no different, except the scale was larger and the stakes higher. What about a third option, she suggested. Not a corporate cover-up, not a whistleblower scandal, but a responsible disclosure through proper channels. Dr. Walsh looked intrigued. What did you have in mind? The CDC has protocols for reporting emerging health threats. The FDA regulates agricultural products. There are systems in place for this kind of situation, systems that can't be shut down by corporate pressure. Lisa's nursing knowledge provided clarity her personal emotions couldn't. If the data is as compelling as you say, these agencies will have to act. That would still mean going against company directives, David pointed out. Yes, Lisa acknowledged, but it would also mean following established public health protocols rather than creating a media firestorm. The agencies could issue appropriate warnings while the full scope is being investigated. As Lisa spoke, something remarkable happened. A spark of her old self emerged through the fog of medication and trauma. This was familiar territory. She'd spent decades navigating health care systems, advocating for appropriate responses to medical concerns. The subject matter might be different, but the approach was one she understood intimately. David and Dr. Walsh exchanged glances, considering the suggestion. It could work, Dr. Walsh said slowly. A formal report from healthcare providers, backed by scientific data and a documented case, would trigger mandatory investigation protocols. And while that's happening, Maya added, catching her mother's line of thinking, we could reach out directly to the other communities at risk. Not as whistleblowers, but as concerned citizens sharing health information. For the first time since the ordeal began, a sense of purpose cut through Lisa's pain and loss. She might be missing an arm, but she still had her knowledge, her experience, and her voice. Sometimes, she said, quoting Grace's favorite saying, the healing comes from helping others avoid the wound. 18 months later, Lisa Chen stood at the edge of her new garden, watching as a group of volunteers from the Willowbrook Garden Club installed raised beds with fresh, tested soil. The autumn sun cast long shadows across her backyard, which had been completely transformed since that fateful spring. Gone was the in-ground garden, where she'd once worked the soil with bare hands. In its place, a carefully designed system of elevated planters with safety measures that would have seemed excessive to her former self. What do you think, Mom? Maya asked, joining her at the garden's edge. At 17, Maya had grown taller over the past year, her face losing some of its youthful roundness. The science fair ribbon pinned to her jacket, national finalist, caught the light as she moved. I think Grace would approve, Lisa replied, adjusting the empty sleeve of her shirt, a habit she'd developed since the amputation. She always said gardens should evolve with their gardeners. The journey to this moment had been arduous. Lisa's recovery had progressed in painful increments. Physical therapy to adjust to her altered balance, occupational therapy to relearn daily tasks with one arm, psychological counseling to process the grief and anger that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her. There had been phantom pain, frustrating limitations, and moments of despair when the simplest tasks became insurmountable obstacles. Yet here she stood, watching a new garden take shape. Different, but alive with possibility. Samuel Morrison approached hesitantly from the group of volunteers, his weathered face solemn. The relationship between the Chens and the Morrisons had been complicated by the events of last year. The farm had survived, though barely, after agreeing to a settlement and implementing rigorous new testing protocols. Lisa, he acknowledged, hat in hand. The raised beds are all in place. We'll start filling them with the certified soil tomorrow, if that works for you. "Thank you, Sam," she replied with genuine warmth. Had all been victims of corporate negligence in their own ways. The Morrisons had lost nearly everything when the truth about the accelerant emerged, saved only by their cooperation with investigators and their commitment to becoming a model for agricultural safety. Sam gestured to the garden design. "The irrigation system's a good addition. No more hand watering. Dr. Walsh's suggestion," Lisa explained, "minimizes direct contact with the soil. Not that we expect any issues with the new supply." The mention of Dr. Walsh brought a smile to Maya's face. The scientist had become a regular visitor to their home after leaving BioGrow to head a new agricultural safety initiative at the state university. Her expertise, combined with Maya's research, had formed the foundation of new guidelines for organic composting, now being implemented nationwide. As Sam returned to the volunteers, David emerged from the house, carrying a tray of iced tea glasses awkwardly balanced in his hands. He'd never quite mastered the art of hospitality, but his efforts over the past year had been consistent and genuine. "Thought everyone could use a break," he announced, setting the tray on the new garden bench, a gift from Lisa's colleagues at Willowbrook Medical. Lisa watched as he distributed drinks to the volunteers, noting how naturally he'd stepped into this role in their lives. He hadn't moved back in. Their romantic relationship remained firmly in the past. But he had purchased the house 3 doors down when it came on the market last winter. Close enough to be present, far enough to maintain healthy boundaries. "He's trying," Maya murmured, following her mother's gaze. "Yes, he is," Lisa agreed. David had sacrificed much to do the right thing. His career at BioGrow had ended the day he and Dr. Walsh submitted their formal reports to the CDC and FDA. The subsequent investigation had revealed a pattern of shortcuts in safety testing that extended beyond the composting accelerant. The company had initially threatened legal action against David for violating confidentiality agreements, but faced with mounting evidence and public scrutiny, they'd eventually offered settlements to affected communities instead. David now worked as a marketing consultant for small businesses in Willowbrook, his corporate aspirations replaced by a commitment to ethical practices and community involvement. The transition hadn't been easy. Lisa had witnessed his struggles with diminished income and professional identity, but she'd also seen a gradual peace settle over him as he rebuilt his life around different priorities. Ms. Chen, a young reporter from the Willowbrook Gazette, approached, notepad in hand. "Could I ask you a few questions about tomorrow's safety symposium?" "You're the keynote speaker, correct?" Lisa nodded, turning away from the garden scene. "Yes, though I'll be sharing the platform with several experts. Dr. Walsh will be presenting the scientific findings, and Maya will discuss her research. And you'll be talking about your personal experience," the reporter asked, pencil poised. "Partly," Lisa acknowledged, "but more importantly, about the community response model we've developed. Healthcare providers, scientists, and citizens can work together to address environmental health concerns." The Garden Safety Initiative had grown from their ordeal, spreading to communities across the state and beyond. What had begun as a personal tragedy had transformed into a movement for greater transparency in agricultural products and more rigorous safety standards for home gardeners. As the reporter jotted notes, Lisa caught sight of a small wooden box near the center of the new garden. Grace's memory box, containing her mother's favorite gardening tools and handwritten notes about plants she'd loved. It would be incorporated into the central herb spiral, a reminder of the garden's history and the woman who had first cultivated this space. "One last question," the reporter said. "After everything you've been through, why continue gardening at all? Many people would have given it up entirely." Lisa considered this, looking from the memory box to Maya to David distributing iced tea to the community members working together to create something new and safe where danger had once lurked unseen. Because gardens are about more than just plants, she answered finally. They're about growth and renewal, about learning from the past while nurturing the future. She touched her empty sleeve gently. I lost part of myself in that garden, but I also found a new purpose. Sometimes the most important growth happens after the deepest pruning. Later, as the volunteers departed and dusk settled over Willowbrook, Lisa, Maya, and David sat on the new garden bench, contemplating the transformed space before them. So, David said, breaking a comfortable silence, tomorrow's the big day. Nervous about your speech? Lisa shook her head. Not really. I've had 18 months to think about what I want to say. And what's that? Maya asked, leaning against her mother's right shoulder. Lisa smiled, watching the first stars appear above their new garden. That there's danger in what we can't see, but there's also tremendous power in looking closely. That communities can heal wounds no individual could survive alone. And that sometimes, she paused, feeling Grace's presence in the gathering darkness. Sometimes you have to lose something precious to find something invaluable. The garden before them was smaller than before, more controlled, more mindful of invisible threats. But it was also more collaborative, more intentional, a testament to lessons learned at great cost and wisdom gained through suffering. Like Lisa herself, it had been fundamentally changed but not defeated. Different, but alive with new purpose. Wounded, but healing. And in that healing, offering hope to others who might never know how close they had come to similar harm. Life has a way of teaching us its most profound lessons through our deepest wounds. Lisa Chen's journey reminds us that at our age, we've learned to treasure what truly matters. Not the parts of ourselves we've lost, but the wisdom we've gained through those losses. Like Lisa's garden, our lives have been transformed by unexpected challenges. Health scares, career setbacks, family struggles. Yet these are the very experiences that have deepened our capacity for resilience and compassion. Remember when our parents told us that with age comes wisdom. They were right, though the path to that wisdom is rarely gentle. Lisa lost her arm but found her voice, her purpose, her community. How many of us have lost something precious, mobility, loved ones, independence, only to discover hidden strengths we never knew we possessed? As we enter this chapter of life, we carry both our scars and our hard-won insights. The most beautiful gardens, like the most beautiful lives, bear witness to survival. Not despite their imperfections, but because of them. The crackling beneath Lisa's skin reminds us that sometimes we must confront the unthinkable to discover what can never be taken from us. Our courage, our voice, our ability to protect those who come after us.
Ethan Collins stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, his trembling fingers tracing the angry crimson circles that had erupted across his once smooth skin. The mirror offered no mercy, revealing the truth he'd been trying to deny for weeks. These weren't ordinary pimples. The rings had perfect, raised borders, like someone had pressed burning coins against his flesh, leaving behind angry red perimeters with dry, flaking centers that resembled scattered ash. "Ethan, you're going to miss the bus." His mother's voice echoed up the narrow staircase of their two-story home. "Coming," he called back, his voice cracking as he yanked his navy hoodie over his head. The rough fabric scraped against his raw skin, igniting a wildfire of itching that made him want to claw at his face. For weeks ago, there had been just one small spot near his left temple. Now they were everywhere, his cheeks, his forehead, creeping down toward his jawline like some malevolent constellation mapping his humiliation. In his bedroom, Peanut's tiny black eyes watched him from behind the wire bars of her deluxe hamster habitat. The golden Syrian hamster had been his faithful companion for 2 years, her cheek pouches always full, her wheels spinning endlessly through the night. Lately, though, even she seemed different. Those dark, intelligent eyes followed his movements with what felt disturbingly like judgment, as if she somehow knew she was connected to the nightmare consuming his life. Something was happening to him. Something that no amount of desperate Google searches at 3 in the morning could explain. Something that threatened to destroy everything he'd worked to build. His reputation, his relationship, his future. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a terrible suspicion was growing. A connection he didn't want to acknowledge between his beloved pet and the mysterious condition that was slowly but surely dismantling his world, one inflamed ring at a time. Riverside, Ohio, nestled along the banks of the Little Miami River, was the kind of mid-sized city where families put down roots and stayed for generations. The Collins family had called it home for nearly 8 decades, their modest colonial on Oak Street, a testament to middle-class American persistence and the dream of steady, incremental progress. It was here that 16-year-old Ethan Collins had grown up, a thoughtful boy with his father's piercing green eyes and his mother's auburn hair, known throughout Riverside High for his easy smile and quiet confidence. Before the spots appeared, Ethan had occupied a comfortable middle ground in the complex social ecosystem of high school. Not quite popular enough to be invited to every weekend party, but well-liked enough to have a solid group of friends and a girlfriend who actually seemed to enjoy his company. He was a solid B+ student who excelled in biology and chemistry, spending his free time capturing the natural beauty of Ohio's changing seasons through his camera lens. His bedroom walls showcased his growing talent. Deer emerging from morning mist in the nearby state park, cardinals against fresh snow, and countless candid shots of Peanut in various adorable poses. The hamster had been his constant companion since his 14th birthday, a tiny creature with an outsized personality who seemed to understand his moods better than most humans. Rebecca Collins, a part-time librarian with a master's degree in literature and an addiction to mystery novels, had always encouraged her son's gentle nature and artistic sensibilities. Some boys spend their time playing violent video games, she would tell her friends with obvious pride, but my Ethan captures beauty in the world around him. She particularly loved how tenderly he cared for Peanut, building elaborate obstacle courses and speaking to her in the soft, patient voice he'd used with wounded birds as a child. David Collins worked as a senior architect at a respected firm in downtown Cincinnati, making the 40-minute commute each day with the reliability of the sunrise. He was a practical man who believed in methodical problem-solving and the power of persistence, someone who approached life's challenges the same way he approached building design, with careful planning, attention to detail, and unwavering commitment to structural integrity. Neither parent quite understood their son's deep attachment to a creature that would live only 2 to 3 years, but they accepted it as part of his sensitive, nurturing character. Peanut lived in what could only be described as a hamster mansion, a multi-level habitat that Ethan had designed and built himself with his father's reluctant help. Positioned strategically near his desk, the elaborate setup included multiple chambers, climbing tubes, and exercise equipment that had cost him 3 months of lawn mowing money. Each night before bed, he would let Peanut explore his bedroom under careful supervision, sometimes falling asleep with the warm, soft bundle of fur nestled in his cupped palms. Olivia Reynolds had been Ethan's girlfriend for 9 months, her dark brown hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her infectious laugh complementing his more reserved personality perfectly. They had the comfortable familiarity of teenagers who had known each other since elementary school, their romance blossoming naturally from years of shared classes and group projects. She understood his passion for photography and even helped him carry equipment on weekend nature walks, never complaining when he stopped every few minutes to capture the perfect shot. Completing Ethan's world was his grandfather Robert, a Vietnam War veteran with calloused hands and a seemingly endless supply of stories about resilience and adaptation. He visited every other Sunday for pot roast and dispensed wisdom with the casual authority of a man who had seen the world change dramatically and remained fundamentally unimpressed by most of it. Robert had a special fondness for Peanut, often bringing her tiny treats and marveling at her intelligence. It started on a Wednesday in mid-March, when Ohio's harsh winter was finally loosening its grip and the first hints of spring were beginning to appear. Ethan first noticed the small red spot while washing his face before school, barely giving it a second thought. At 16, occasional blemishes were simply part of the territory, an expected tax on the already complicated business of being a teenager. He dabbed some over-the-counter acne medication on it and went about his day, already mentally planning the weekend photography expedition he and Lluvia had been discussing. By Monday, the spot hadn't disappeared, but had transformed into something that made him pause in front of the mirror. It now had a raised, circular edge with a slightly scaly center that looked nothing like any pimple he'd ever experienced. More troubling, two similar spots had appeared on his other cheek over the weekend. During lunch, Lluvia had reached across the cafeteria table to touch his face, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on here?" she asked, her finger hovering just above the largest spot. "Just stress, probably," Ethan shrugged, pulling away slightly. "You know how my skin gets before big tests. It's midterm season." But privately, he was beginning to worry. That weekend, he found himself standing uncomfortably close to the bathroom mirror, examining the strange eruptions with growing unease. It didn't look like the acne he was familiar with. There were no whiteheads, no typical inflammation patterns. These were perfect circles, almost geometric in their precision. They reminded him uncomfortably of the ringworm he'd seen on his cousin's cat the previous summer, but that couldn't be right. He hadn't been around any stray animals or unusual environments. "You're overthinking this," he told his reflection, squeezing more acne cream onto his fingertip. "It's just a weird breakout. Maybe you need something stronger." When Monday arrived, the spots had multiplied. By Wednesday, there were 7 distinct rings, the largest nearly the size of a quarter. The itching had begun in earnest now, a constant, maddening sensation that made it nearly impossible to concentrate during classes. In the hallway between chemistry and English, he caught Blake Morrison staring at him with undisguised fascination. "Dude, what happened to your face?" Blake asked loudly enough for several other students to hear, his voice carrying that particular blend of curiosity and cruelty that teenage boys seem to master effortlessly. Heat rushed to Ethan's cheeks, making the inflamed areas burn even more intensely. "Nothing. It's just acne," Blake snorted with derision. "That's not acne, man. That looks like some kind of disease or something." That night, Ethan emptied his savings account of $27.43 on 3 different acne treatment products from the local pharmacy. The middle-aged pharmacist had given him a sympathetic look that made him want to disappear through the floor. At home, he locked himself in the bathroom and applied all 3 treatments simultaneously, wincing at the burning sensation that followed. "Honey, dinner's ready," his mother called through the door 15 minutes later. "Not hungry," he replied, unable to take his eyes off his reflection as he tried to convince himself the treatments were already showing signs of working. As March turned to April, the condition worsened dramatically. The rings spread down to his chin and up toward his hairline, creating an angry map of inflammation across his face. The centers became increasingly dry and flaky, while the borders grew more raised and inflamed. The itching became nearly unbearable, especially at night when he lay in bed trying unsuccessfully to sleep, while fighting the overwhelming urge to scratch. His parents began to notice despite his increasingly desperate efforts to hide the severity with baseball caps pulled low and hoodies with drawstrings pulled tight around his face. "Have you been using some new face wash or something different on your skin?" His mother asked one morning, studying him across the breakfast table with the sharp attention that mothers seem to possess by instinct. "It's just acne, Mom," he muttered, focusing intently on his cereal as if the floating pieces of grain held the secrets of the universe. "Everyone gets it. That doesn't look like ordinary acne to me," she persisted, her voice taking on the tone that meant she wasn't going to let this go easily. "Since when are you a dermatologist?" Ethan snapped, immediately regretting his harsh tone when he saw hurt flash across her face like a physical blow. At school, the whispers seemed to follow him through the halls like shadows. Lluvia remained loyal, but he could see her concern deepening each day, her usual easy affection replaced by a careful distance that broke his heart in small, incremental ways. During study hall, she slipped him a small tube with the discretion of a spy passing state secrets. "My mom uses this for her eczema," she whispered. It has hydrocortisone in it. Might help with the inflammation. Ethan accepted it gratefully, applying it in the bathroom between classes. The cooling sensation provided temporary relief from the constant itching, and for a brief, shining moment, hope flickered in his chest like a candle in a storm. That hope was devastatingly short-lived. By the following week, his face looked worse than ever. The rings had begun to merge into larger, angry patches, and white, flaky scales appeared along his jawline like the aftermath of a terrible sunburn. The morning of April 23rd, he woke to find his pillowcase spotted with blood where he'd scratched in his sleep. His fingernails, having done damage his conscious mind had tried to prevent. "That's it," his father declared when Ethan came downstairs, no longer able to hide the severity of his condition behind hoodies and strategic lighting. "We're calling Dr. Martinez today. It's just a bad breakout," Ethan protested weakly, but even he could hear the lack of conviction in his voice. "Son, that's not acne," David Collins said firmly, his architect's eye for detail making denial impossible. "Whatever it is, it's getting worse, not better. We're getting you help." The family doctor took one look at Ethan's face and immediately referred him to a dermatologist. "Dr. Chen can see you next Thursday," the receptionist told them in the kind of cheerful voice reserved for delivering disappointing news. "Next Thursday?" Rebecca echoed, her voice rising with maternal anxiety. "That's more than a week away. Look at his face." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. That's the earliest appointment available." For 8 more days, Ethan endured the stares and whispers at school. Blake's taunts escalated to outright mockery, complete with theatrical performances where he would scratch his face dramatically and pretend to be contagious, drawing laughter from a cruel audience that seemed to grow larger each day. Olivia tried to defend him, but even she seemed increasingly uncomfortable around him, their usual easy physical affection replaced by hesitant, careful distance that hurt more than any words could. At home, Ethan spent more time with Peanut, finding comfort in the hamster's uncritical companionship. He would sit beside her habitat for hours, watching her run on her wheel or stuff her cheek pouches with food, whispering his fears and frustrations to the only creature who seemed unaffected by his changing appearance. "At least you don't care what I look like," he murmured, gently stroking her golden fur through the bars of her cage. He had no idea that with every touch, every moment of comfort he sought from his beloved pet, he was unknowingly perpetuating the very condition that was destroying his life. Thursday arrived with the kind of spring rainstorm that seemed designed to wash away winter's final remnants. Ethan sat in the passenger seat of his father's sedan, hoodie pulled up despite being inside the car, as they navigated through the rain toward Cincinnati's medical district. His face burned and itched beneath the fabric, but the physical discomfort paled in comparison to his anxiety about what the doctor might discover. "It'll be fine, son," David said, glancing sideways at Ethan as they stopped at a red light. "Dr. Chen is supposed to be one of the best dermatologists in Southern Ohio." Ethan nodded without speaking. He'd spent the previous night researching skin diseases online, each Google search leading him down darker and more terrifying rabbit holes. Lupus, psoriasis, rare tropical infections. His imagination had constructed countless scenarios, none of them ending well. The dermatology clinic occupied the entire 4th floor of a sleek medical building that smelled of antiseptic and quiet desperation. In the waiting room, Ethan kept his head down, acutely aware of other patients stealing glances at his inflamed face. A toddler stared openly with the brutal honesty of childhood before his mother gently turned his head away. Ethan Collins. A nurse appeared at the doorway with a clipboard, her professional smile never wavering despite the obvious shock that flickered across her features when she saw his condition. In the examination room, Ethan reluctantly lowered his hood. The nurse's carefully maintained composure slipped for just a moment, her eyes widening slightly before she recovered her professional demeanor. "Dr. Chen will be with you shortly," she said, taking his vital signs with practiced efficiency. Dr. Linda Chen was younger than Ethan had expected, with kind dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and a no-nonsense manner that somehow managed to be both reassuring and authoritative. She studied his face without comment for what felt like an eternity, then began asking questions in a calm, methodical voice that reminded him of his father's approach to complex architectural problems. How long had he noticed the condition? What treatments had he tried? Any allergies? Any new foods, soaps, or medications in recent months? Then came a question that caught him completely off guard. Do you have any pets at home, Ethan? He blinked in surprise, thrown by the apparent non sequitur. Just my hamster, Peanut. I've had her for about 2 years, doctor. Chen nodded thoughtfully, making notes on her tablet. And do you handle her frequently? Let her near your face? Well, yeah, Ethan admitted, a cold sensation beginning to form in his stomach. She sleeps on my bed sometimes. I let her explore my room under supervision. The doctor took several high-resolution photographs of his face from different angles, then used a small, sterile tool to scrape gently at one of the lesions. This won't hurt, she assured him, transferring the sample to a glass slide with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this procedure thousands of times. 25 minutes later, after examining the sample under a high-powered microscope, Dr. Chen returned with a diagnosis that would change everything. What you have, Ethan, is called tinea faciae. It's a fungal infection of the facial skin. She sat down across from him, her expression serious but not unkind. Specifically, you've contracted trichophyton mentogrophytes, which is commonly found in the fur and bedding of small rodents like hamsters. The room seemed to tilt slightly as Ethan processed her words. The sound of his own heartbeat seemed unnaturally loud in his ears. From Peanut, but she's perfectly healthy. She's not sick at all. Animals can carry the fungus without showing any symptoms themselves, Dr. Chen explained patiently. What's made your case particularly severe is the use of steroid cream on the affected areas. The hydrocortisone actually suppressed your immune response while feeding the fungus, creating what we call tinea incognita, a modified presentation that's often mistaken for other conditions. David Collins leaned forward in his chair, his face pale. So this is all from his hamster? All of this suffering? Most likely, yes, the doctor confirmed. The good news is that it's completely treatable with antifungal medication. The bad news is that the source of infection needs to be addressed. The implication hung in the air like a sword suspended by a thread. You mean Peanut? Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. You're talking about getting rid of Peanut, doctor. Chen's expression was sympathetic but firm. At minimum, the hamster needs to be kept completely out of your bedroom, and you should limit direct contact significantly. Ideally, for your health, finding a new home for the animal would be the safest course of action. No, Ethan protested, his voice louder than he'd intended, drawing startled looks from both adults. I'm not getting rid of her. She's not just something you can throw away. Ethan, his father said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of parental authority. Be reasonable. Look what this has done to you. I don't care. It's not her fault. Tears pricked at Ethan's eyes, adding humiliation to his growing despair. The drive home was conducted in tense silence. In one hand, Ethan clutched the prescription for oral terbinafine and antifungal cream. In his mind, he was already formulating desperate arguments to save Peanut from exile, plans that seemed more impossible with each passing mile. At dinner that night, the discussion exploded into the Collins family's first real argument in years. I'm sorry, but the hamster has to go, David announced, his tone making it clear this wasn't open for negotiation. Dad, please, Ethan begged, his voice breaking with desperation. Dr. Chen said I just need to be more careful. I can keep Peanut in the basement. I'll wear gloves when I handle her. I'll build a better containment system. Honey, we're talking about your health, Rebecca added, her motherly instincts warring with her sympathy for her son's obvious pain. What if it gets worse? What if it scars permanently? I don't care. Ethan slammed his palm on the table, making the silverware jump and creating a sound that seemed to echo through the house. You're asking me to abandon her. Would you give me away if I made you sick? His parents exchanged one of those wordless looks that told Ethan they'd already made their decision while he'd been upstairs trying to process the diagnosis. His father's voice softened, but his resolve remained unmoved. We'll find her a good home. The Peterson family down the street has been talking about getting a pet for their daughter. They already have experience with small animals. So she can infect their kid too? Ethan shot back bitterly. I thought you cared about other people. He stormed upstairs and locked his bedroom door, his face burning with both the fungal infection and the tears he couldn't hold back. Sitting beside Peanut's elaborate habitat, he stroked her tiny ears through the bars, his heart breaking with each gentle movement. "I won't let them take you," he whispered to the hamster, who seemed to sense his distress and pressed herself against the bars near his fingers. "I promise." The next day at school brought a second devastating blow. News of his diagnosis had somehow spread through the gossip network that seemed to operate faster than the internet in small cities. By lunchtime, a new nickname had emerged and was spreading with viral efficiency: Fungus Face. Olivia found him hiding in the library during lunch period, sliding into the chair across from him with the careful movements of someone approaching a wounded animal. "Hey," she said softly. "I heard what happened. That really sucks." Ethan looked up, grateful for her support, but what he saw in her eyes wasn't just sympathy. There was something else lurking beneath the surface: revulsion, fear, disgust. The subtle signs were all there. The way she maintained a noticeable distance, the slight tightening around her eyes, the unconscious way she kept her hands firmly on her side of the table. "Yeah," he muttered. "So it's really from your hamster?" she asked, unable to keep a note of incredulity from her voice. "Peanut didn't do it on purpose," he said defensively, already sensing where this conversation was heading. "Of course not," Olivia said quickly. But she hesitated, chewing her lower lip in the way she did when she was working up courage for something difficult. "Are you going to, get rid of her?" "No, why does everyone keep saying that?" Olivia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "My mom says these fungal things can spread really easily between people. She's worried that maybe I shouldn't." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence that would shatter what remained of his world. Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach like a stone dropping into dark water. "Shouldn't what? Be near me? Are you breaking up with me because of this?" "No, maybe until the treatment works, we should be careful. That's all." But Ethan had already stood up, gathering his books with shaking hands. The final betrayal. Not just his appearance, not just his beloved pet, but now his girlfriend too. The foundations of his life were crumbling beneath his feet, all because of microscopic spores that no one could even see. The antifungal medication made Ethan violently nauseous for the first 4 days. He spent most of that time huddled in bed, alternating between fighting waves of sickness and obsessively applying the prescribed cream to his face. The itching had marginally subsided, but the angry red rings remained defiant, their borders still raised and inflamed like tiny volcanoes across the landscape of his face. "You need to eat something," Rebecca insisted, setting a bowl of chicken soup on his nightstand. Her eyes lingered on Peanut's habitat, which Ethan had defiantly cleaned and repositioned farther from his bed, a compromise he'd negotiated through his locked door during one of their heated discussions. "I'm not hungry," he mumbled, but reached for the spoon anyway. The medication's instructions were clear: take with food to minimize stomach upset. Rebecca sat on the edge of his bed, her expression a mixture of maternal concern and frustration. The school called. "Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you'll be back on Monday." Ethan stared into his soup as if it contained answers to questions he was afraid to ask. The thought of returning to school, of facing the stares and whispers and Blake Morrison's increasingly creative cruelty, made his stomach churn worse than the medication. "I can't," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Honey, you can't miss much more school. It's almost May and finals are coming up. Mom, look at me." Ethan gestured at his face, his voice cracking with emotion. "Would you want to go out looking like this?" Rebecca's expression softened, her heart clearly breaking for her son. "The medicine will work. Dr. Chen said it might take a few weeks to see significant improvement." "A few weeks? I can't hide in here for weeks." "No one's asking you to hide," Rebecca said gently, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "This isn't something you did wrong, Ethan. It's just bad luck. Bad luck." As if the universe had randomly selected him for humiliation, as if his suffering was just some cosmic coincidence. But Ethan didn't see it that way. It felt deliberate, targeted. The universe seemed to be systematically dismantling everything he cared about, and now it was coming for Peanut too. That night, he created a new Instagram account under a fake name and spent hours researching fungal infections, treatment options, and especially cases where people had contracted diseases from pets, but managed to keep the animals. The internet offered conflicting information. Some medical sites suggested rehoming was the only safe option, while others described careful management protocols that could reduce transmission risk. He took screenshots of the latter, building his case like a lawyer preparing for the most important trial of his life. The medication began to work slowly. By the end of the first week, the itching had subsided considerably, though the redness remained stubbornly prominent. Ethan finally agreed to return to school, armed with his hoodie and a carefully rehearsed indifference to stares that he hoped would carry him through the social minefield that awaited. The reality was worse than he'd imagined. While most students simply avoided him now, Blake Morrison had elevated his torment to a sophisticated art form. "Hazmat team to the cafeteria," Blake announced loudly when Ethan entered with his lunch tray. "We've got a contamination situation." A few students laughed nervously. Most looked uncomfortable, which was almost worse than open mockery. Olivia sat with her usual group of friends, but didn't invite him over. When their eyes met across the room, she gave a small, apologetic wave before looking away quickly, as if prolonged eye contact might somehow transmit the infection through visual contact alone. Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor, called Ethan to her office during third period. "I understand you're going through a difficult time," she said, her voice trained in the gentle tones of professional empathy that somehow made everything worse. "I want you to know that bullying of any kind isn't tolerated at Riverside High." Ethan slouched in the chair across from her desk, studying the motivational posters on her walls as if they held the secrets of survival. "Then maybe you should tell Blake Morrison that." "We've spoken with Blake," she assured him. "But I'm more concerned about you right now. How are you coping with everything?" The question was so earnest, so direct, that Ethan found himself unexpectedly close to tears. He swallowed hard, fighting for control. "Fine," he lied. "The medicine is working." Mrs. Henderson leaned forward, her expression genuinely caring. "Ethan, physical health is only part of the equation. When our appearance changes suddenly, especially at your age, it can affect how we see ourselves, how we interact with others." "You mean how others interact with me?" Ethan corrected bitterly. "My girlfriend can barely look at me. My parents want to get rid of my hamster. Everyone thinks I'm contagious." "Have you considered that some of this might be your perception rather than reality?" she suggested carefully. "Sometimes when we feel vulnerable, we project our fears onto other people's actions." Ethan scoffed, a sound that came out harsher than he'd intended. "Trust me, I'm not projecting Blake's comments about hazmat suits." Mrs. Henderson nodded with understanding. "Fair enough, but what about your parents? Have you really listened to their concerns? Or Olivia, have you asked her directly what she's thinking instead of assuming the worst?" The suggestion lingered with Ethan throughout the day, planting seeds of doubt about his own interpretation of events. Had he been so wrapped up in his own misery that he'd misread everyone's reactions? By seventh period, he'd convinced himself to text Olivia. "Can we talk after school?" Her response came quickly, "Bleachers at 3:15. The spring afternoon was cool but bright as Ethan made his way to the football field. Olivia was already there, her dark hair catching the sunlight as it lifted occasionally in the breeze. She didn't move away when he sat beside her, which he counted as a positive sign. "I'm not contagious," he said without preamble, the words tumbling out in a rush. "Not if we're just sitting together or whatever. Dr. Chen said it requires direct contact with the fungus, and even then, now that I'm on medication, the risk is minimal." Olivia nodded, studying her hands. "I know, I looked it up." She paused, gathering courage. "I'm sorry about the other day. I freaked out, and that wasn't fair to you. Your mom doesn't want you near me, does she?" "She's being ridiculous," Olivia admitted. "She made me wash all my clothes after I told her about your diagnosis, like I'd been in some kind of contamination zone or something." Despite everything, Ethan felt a small smile form. "Wow, yeah, but Ethan..." Olivia turned to face him fully, her expression serious. "It's not just about the fungus thing. You've been different even before the diagnosis. Pulling away, snapping at everyone. I get that you're going through something awful, but you won't let anyone help." Her words stung with the sharp precision of truth. He had been retreating, building walls, assuming rejection before it could occur. "I'm trying. he said quietly. Olivia hesitated, then reached for his hand, a deliberate gesture of trust that wasn't lost on either of them. I know, and I'm not going anywhere, okay? Despite what my germaphobe mother thinks. For the first time in weeks, something loosened in Ethan's chest. One small victory, but a victory nonetheless. At home, the tension around Peanut remained a constant undercurrent. His parents had stopped explicitly mentioning rehoming, but Ethan caught them exchanging meaningful glances whenever he mentioned the hamster or disappeared upstairs to clean her habitat. The unspoken threat hung in the air like smoke, invisible but impossible to ignore. On Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Ethan, who had been researching pet-safe disinfectants for Peanut's habitat, heard his mother greeting someone with unusual warmth. "Robert, we weren't expecting you until tomorrow." Grandfather Colin's distinctive rumbling laugh echoed up the stairs. "Since when does an old man need a formal invitation to see his family? Where's the boy?" Ethan hesitated. He hadn't seen his grandfather since the skin problems began, and the thought of those wise, observant eyes taking in his ravaged face made him cringe with anticipated embarrassment. But there was no avoiding it. His grandfather would simply come upstairs if Ethan didn't appear. Taking a deep breath, he descended to the living room. Robert Collins sat in his usual armchair, his tall frame slightly stooped with age but still commanding presence. At 74, with a full head of silver hair and the weathered hands of a man who'd spent decades working with tools, he carried an air of unshakable certainty about the world and his place in it. "There he is," Robert said, his eyes taking in Ethan's appearance without a flicker of surprise or disgust. "Come sit with me, son." Ethan reluctantly took the couch across from his grandfather, bracing himself for questions or platitudes. Rebecca and David exchanged glances before David spoke. "Dad, we didn't tell you about Ethan's condition because we didn't want to worry you." Robert waved a dismissive hand. "Rebecca called me 3 days ago, told me everything. That's why I'm here." Ethan shot his mother a betrayed look, but she merely raised her eyebrows in silent challenge. "Ethan thinks we don't understand what he's going through," she explained to Robert. "Maybe you can talk some sense into him about the hamster." When his parents had retreated to the kitchen, ostensibly to give them privacy, Robert leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "So you got yourself a fungus from that cotton ball critter upstairs," he said with characteristic bluntness. Ethan winced at the assessment. "It's not Peanut's fault." "Didn't say it was," Robert replied calmly. "Fault's a useless concept when it comes to nature. Things are what they are." He paused, studying his grandson's face. "Your folks want you to get rid of the hamster." "They say it's for my health," Ethan muttered, "but I can be careful. I can wear gloves, keep her habitat cleaner, wash my hands religiously. I've been reading about it." Robert nodded slowly. "You love that hamster." "She's been with me through everything," Ethan said, surprised by the emotion welling in his voice. "When I didn't make the basketball team, when you and Grandma Mary got divorced, when I was too nervous to ask Olivia out, Peanut was always there. She doesn't care what I look like or if I say the wrong thing. Animals are good that way," Robert agreed. He was quiet for a moment, then began rolling up his sleeve. "Want to see something interesting?" Curious, Ethan watched as his grandfather exposed his forearm. There, amidst the liver spots and wrinkles of age, was a patch of slightly darker, rough-textured skin about 3 inches in diameter. "See that? Had that since I was about your age." Ethan leaned closer, studying the discolored area. "What is it?" "Fungal infection. Different kind than yours. I got mine from the barracks in Vietnam. Athletes foot that spread because military doctors back then weren't too concerned with comfort. They slapped some purple antiseptic on it and told us to keep our feet dry." Robert rolled his sleeve back down. "Never quite went away. Flares up sometimes when I get overheated or stressed." "You've had a fungal infection for over 50 years? Ethan asked, astonished. Robert chuckled, a sound devoid of self-pity. "Don't look so horrified. It's just a reminder of where I've been. Our skin tells our stories, Ethan. Some folks get scars from accidents, some get wrinkles from laughing, some get calluses from honest work. You got some fungus from loving something. Could be worse." The simple perspective shift left Ethan momentarily speechless. He'd been viewing his condition as a humiliating affliction, not as part of a life story still being written. "But about that hamster, Robert continued, his tone becoming more serious. Your parents aren't wrong to be concerned. Ethan's face fell. So you think I should get rid of her too? I didn't say that. I said their concern is valid. Question is, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? I mean, son, that problems have solutions if you want to keep that hamster badly enough. You need to find a way that addresses your parents' legitimate concerns while respecting your attachment to the animal. That's how adults handle these situations. The challenge hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. For the first time since his diagnosis, Ethan felt something beyond self-pity or defensive anger. He felt the stirrings of purpose, the beginning of a plan. Over the next few days, Ethan threw himself into research with the dedication of a graduate student. He read scientific papers about zoonotic diseases, studied proper sanitation protocols for pet owners, and even emailed Dr. Chen with specific questions about managing his condition while keeping Peanut. To his surprise, the doctor responded with detailed suggestions rather than an outright recommendation to rehome the hamster. While elimination of the source is ideal, she wrote, I understand the emotional bond with pets. If you choose to keep the hamster, these precautions can significantly reduce the risk of reinfection. Armed with this information and a detailed plan, Ethan approached his parents with a formal proposal. He would move Peanut's habitat to the basement, create a dedicated animal care station with gloves, sanitizer, and separate clothing, and commit to a strict hygiene protocol. He would also pay for a veterinary examination to ensure Peanut wasn't suffering from any fungal skin issues herself. I've thought about this carefully, he concluded, handing them the printed email from Dr. Chen along with his research. This isn't just me being emotional. There's a responsible way to do this. David and Rebecca exchanged surprised looks at their son's thorough preparation and mature approach. We'll consider it, David said finally, but the treatment has to show results first. If your condition worsens or plateaus, we'll have to reconsider. It was a conditional victory, but a victory nonetheless. That night, Ethan texted Olivia with the update, adding, Thanks for sticking with me through this. It means more than you know. Her response was immediate. That's what people who care about each other do. See you tomorrow. As April turned to May, small improvements became noticeable. The red rings began to fade to pink, and the scaling decreased significantly. Dr. Chen expressed satisfaction with his progress during a follow-up appointment, though she cautioned that the full course of treatment would take several more weeks. At school, Ethan gradually emerged from his hoodie-clad isolation. Mrs. Henderson suggested he might consider speaking to the health classes about his experience once he felt comfortable, a way to educate others and take control of his own narrative, as she put it. The idea terrified and intrigued him in equal measure. Could he transform this humiliating ordeal into something meaningful? His grandfather's words echoed in his mind. Our skin tells our stories. Perhaps this chapter of his story didn't have to be solely about suffering. Perhaps it could also be about resilience, about learning, about growth. That evening, as he carefully cleaned Peanut's temporary quarters in the basement while wearing the latex gloves that had become second nature, Ethan felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. The hamster watched him with her dark, intelligent eyes, whiskers twitching in what he chose to interpret as approval. We're going to be okay, he told her, and for the first time in weeks, he actually believed it. By early June, the Collins family basement had undergone a remarkable transformation. What had once been a catch-all space for holiday decorations and forgot exercise equipment now featured a dedicated corner that David had jokingly dubbed Hamster Haven. The setup was Ethan's design, implemented with his father's engineering skills and his mother's organizational expertise. Peanut's habitat sat elevated on a custom-built platform, large enough to give her ample space, but positioned to minimize the dispersal of any potential allergens or fungal spores. A small utility sink had been installed nearby, David's suggestion, along with a shelf containing neatly labeled supplies, latex gloves, hand sanitizer, specialized cleaning products, and a logbook where Ethan dutifully recorded each cleaning session and health observation. It's like a miniature laboratory down here, Olivia remarked one afternoon as she watched Ethan go through his now familiar routine. She sat perched on a folding chair several feet away, respecting the clean zone boundaries they'd established after consulting with Dr. Chen. Dad calls it Operation Containment, Ethan replied, carefully changing Peanut's water bottle while wearing his designated animal care clothes, a specific set of old jeans and a long-sleeved shirt kept in a sealed container when not in use. It's impressive, Olivia said sincerely. Most guys would have just given up and gotten rid of her. Ethan glanced at Peanut, who was contentedly stuffing her cheek pouches with sunflower seeds, blissfully unaware of the elaborate systems created for her continued residence in the Collins household. She's worth it, he said simply. The routine had indeed become second nature. Gloves on before touching anything in the habitat, dedicated clothes for handling, immediate hand washing, afterward regular disinfection of all surfaces. Dr. Chen had approved the setup during a telehealth follow-up, commenting that Ethan could consider a career in infectious disease management if his photography ambitions didn't pan out. Upstairs, the doorbell rang. Olivia stood, checking her phone. That's probably my mom. I should go. Ethan carefully removed his gloves, depositing them in the designated waste bin, then washed his hands thoroughly before accompanying Olivia upstairs. Their relationship had not only weathered the initial shock, but had settled into a new normal that felt somehow stronger than before, tested by adversity and proven resilient. Though Mrs. Reynolds still harbored obvious reservations, Ethan noticed she always found reasons to wipe down surfaces after he'd visited their home. Olivia herself had become an unexpected advocate, researching fungal infections almost as thoroughly as Ethan had. At the front door, Olivia hesitated, then leaned in to kiss his cheek, a deliberate gesture of trust and affection that wasn't lost on either of them. "See you tomorrow," she said softly. "Yeah," Ethan nodded, his fingers automatically reaching up to touch his face after she left. The skin there was still discolored in places, but the raised, inflamed rings had flattened considerably. According to Dr. Chen, he was healing remarkably well, though some hyperpigmentation might remain for months. His mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Olivia's mother actually came to the door this time instead of honking from the driveway. I'd call that progress. Ethan smiled faintly. Baby steps. "Speaking of progress," Rebecca continued, "your father and I have been talking. If your next appointment goes well, we think it might be time to make the basement arrangement permanent." Ethan stared at her, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. "You mean Peanut can stay, for good?" "With conditions," Rebecca clarified quickly. "The protocols stay in place, no exceptions, no cutting corners, and at the first sign of any skin issues, we reevaluate immediately." "Absolutely," Ethan agreed quickly. "I promise. No shortcuts, no exceptions." Rebecca studied her son's face, not just the healing skin, but the earnest expression, the determined set of his jaw that reminded her so much of David when he was working through a particularly challenging architectural problem. "You've handled this whole situation very maturely, you know. Your grandfather was right about you." "What did he say?" "That you'd find a way to solve the problem instead of just complaining about it. That you had more backbone than we were giving you credit for." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest at the unexpected praise. "Thanks, Mom." That evening, as the family sat down to dinner, David raised the topic of the upcoming school health fair. "Mrs. Henderson called today," he informed Ethan. "She wanted to know if you'd reconsidered her offer to speak about your experience." Ethan pushed his green beans around his plate thoughtfully. The suggestion had been floating between them for weeks, but he'd neither committed to nor definitively rejected the idea. "I don't know. Standing up in front of everyone, talking about my face, it seems kind of humiliating. Or empowering," Rebecca suggested. "Owning your story instead of letting others tell it for you." "Your mother has a point," David agreed. "Think about how many kids probably self-diagnose skin conditions. Your experience could actually help someone." Ethan considered this. The past few weeks had indeed shown him how common misdiagnosed skin issues were among teenagers. His own classmate Marcus had recently confided that Ethan's situation had prompted him to get a persistent rash checked out. It had turned out to be psoriasis, not the eczema he'd been treating it as for months. Maybe, Ethan conceded. I'll think about it. Later that night, as he completed Peanut's evening care routine, his phone buzzed with a text from Blake Morrison, the last person he expected to hear from. Hey man, weird question, but what doctor did you see for your skin thing? Ethan stared at the message in disbelief. Blake hadn't spoken directly to him since the hazmat incident, instead retreating to sidelong glances and whispered comments that had gradually diminished as Ethan's condition improved. After a moment's hesitation, he replied, Dr. Chen at Cincinnati Dermatology Associates. Why? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, just wondering, thanks. Curious, Ethan added, everything okay? This time the response came quickly. My little sister has some weird rash. Parents are freaking out. Ethan felt an unexpected twinge of sympathy. Despite everything Blake had put him through, he wouldn't wish the uncertainty and fear of an undiagnosed skin condition on anyone. Hope she's okay. Dr. C is good. Tell them to mention they need urgent care, might get in faster. Thanks, came the reply, followed by an awkward pause then. Sorry about the pepperoni pizza comments, BTW. That was messed up. It wasn't much as apologies went, but the gesture itself was surprising. It's fine, Ethan texted back, finding that strangely it actually was. The next morning, Ethan woke to find his face looking better than it had in weeks. The discoloration had faded significantly overnight, and even the stubborn patch near his jawline seemed less noticeable. Studying his reflection, he could almost recognize his former self again. With a surge of confidence he hadn't felt in months, he left his hoodie hanging in the closet and headed to school in just a t-shirt. The day passed with fewer stares than he'd grown accustomed to, and in biology class, Ms. Martinez even commented on how well he was looking. By lunchtime, Ethan had made his decision. He found Mrs. Henderson in her office, knocking tentatively on the open door. Ethan, come in, she greeted him warmly. You're looking very well. Thanks, he said, taking a seat across from her desk. I've been thinking about the health fair presentation you mentioned. Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with interest. And I'll do it, he said, the words coming out more confidently than he felt. But I want to focus on more than just my diagnosis. I want to talk about how to properly care for pets to prevent zoonotic diseases and how important it is to see a doctor instead of self-treating. That sounds perfect, Mrs. Henderson beamed. We could even coordinate with the science department, make it educational across multiple subjects. As they discussed the details, Ethan felt a new sense of purpose taking shape. What had begun as a personal nightmare was transforming into something potentially valuable for others. After school, Olivia joined him for what had become their regular basement visit with Peanut. As Ethan carefully refreshed the hamster's food and water, Olivia shared news from her student council meeting. So the health fair is definitely set for the last week of school, she reported. And guess what? When I mentioned you were planning to speak about your experience, Ms. Martinez suggested you might display some of your wildlife photography alongside the health information. She said it would make a nice connection between appreciating animals and understanding the responsibilities of interaction with them. Ethan looked up from his task, surprised. She's seen my photography. Apparently, Mr. Davis showed her your portfolio from art class. She was impressed. The idea ignited something in Ethan, a creative spark that had been dormant during his weeks of self-consciousness. I could do a whole series, he mused, ideas suddenly flowing. Close-up shots of animal fur and skin, paired with microscopic images of the bacteria and fungi they can carry, beautiful but potentially dangerous. Dr. Chen might even have access to laboratory images you could use, Olivia added enthusiastically. Emma smiled at his enthusiasm. That sounds amazing. You could call it Invisible Worlds or something. Their brainstorming was interrupted by David calling down the stairs. Ethan, can you come up here? There's someone here to see you. Puzzled, Ethan went through his hand-washing routine and headed upstairs, Olivia following behind. In the living room stood Blake Morrison, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Blake, Ethan said, confusion evident in his voice. Hey, Blake mumbled, not quite meeting Ethan's eyes. Sorry to just show up. Your mom said it was okay to wait for you. An awkward silence stretched between them until David cleared his throat. "I've got some work to finish in the garage. Olivia, Rebecca could use some help in the kitchen if you don't mind." When they were alone, Blake finally spoke. "So, we took my sister to that doctor you recommended, Dr. Chen." "Oh," Ethan nodded. "What did she say?" "Turns out she has the same thing you had, that tinea whatever, fungus from our family's guinea pigs." Blake's expression was a mix of embarrassment and relief. She knew exactly what it was as soon as she saw it. Said if we hadn't brought her in, it could have gotten way worse. "That's good you caught it early," Ethan offered. "Yeah, and well," Blake shifted his weight uncomfortably. "My mom wanted me to thank you. And I wanted to, apologize properly for being such a jerk about your face. Especially now that Sarah's got the same thing." The sincerity in Blake's voice was unmistakable. Ethan felt the last remnants of bitterness he'd been harboring begin to dissolve. "It's okay, you didn't know." Still, it was messed up. Blake finally looked directly at Ethan. "Anyway, my mom wants to know if your parents would talk to her about how you guys managed the pet situation. She's kind of freaking out about getting rid of Sarah's guinea pigs." Ethan felt a smile tugging at his lips, not at Mrs. Morrison's distress, but at the ironic turn of events. "Yeah, I think they'd be happy to. We've become experts at pet quarantine procedures around here." For the first time in their entire acquaintance, genuine gratitude appeared on Blake's face. "Thanks, man. Seriously." As Ethan showed Blake the elaborate setup in the basement, explaining the protocols they'd developed, he experienced a strange sense of coming full circle. The very condition that had caused him so much shame was now positioning him as a source of knowledge, someone who could help others navigate similar challenges. Later, after Blake had left with promises of his mother calling to arrange a proper conversation, Olivia squeezed Ethan's hand. "Look at you," she said softly. "From pariah to community resource in 2 months flat." Ethan laughed, the sound free and genuine. "I don't know about that." "I do," Olivia insisted. "You didn't just cope with this, Ethan. You mastered it. You found a way to keep what mattered to you while still doing the right thing for your health. That's pretty impressive." As the evening light filtered through the basement windows, casting a warm glow over Peanut's habitat and the careful systems they'd created, Ethan felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The journey had been painful, humiliating at times, but he was emerging from it stronger, wiser, and somehow more complete than before. Just when things seemed to be steadily improving, the universe decided Ethan Collins hadn't been tested quite enough. 3 weeks before the end of the school year, as he was finalizing his presentation for the health fair, disaster struck on multiple fronts. It began with a stress-induced flare-up. The night after staying up late to complete both his chemistry final project and the health fair materials, Ethan noticed an alarming development in the mirror. A new, angry red patch had appeared near his hairline, and some of the nearly healed areas on his cheeks seemed more inflamed than they had been in weeks. "This can't be happening," he muttered, leaning closer to the bathroom mirror. The familiar panic rose in his throat as he gently touched the new lesion. It was smaller than the original ones had been, but unmistakably similar in appearance. He immediately texted Dr. Chen photos and received a response the next morning that simultaneously relieved and dismayed him. "This appears to be a stress reaction triggering a small recurrence," she wrote. "Common during recovery from tinea faciae, especially when the immune system is compromised by exhaustion or anxiety. Continue medication protocol and try to reduce stress factors. If not improved in 48 hours, come in for reassessment. Reduce stress." Easier said than done, with finals approaching, the health fair presentation looming, and college recommendation deadlines on the horizon. Ethan had been counting on his photography teacher's support for his application to a summer workshop at the Art Institute of Chicago, a potential stepping stone to college art programs. Now the prospect of his face regressing to its previous condition threatened to derail everything. "I thought we were past this," David frowned when Ethan showed him Dr. Chen's message over breakfast. "Have you been following all the protocols with Peanut?" "Of course I have," Ethan said defensively. "Dr. Chen says it's stress, not reinfection. Maybe we should reconsider." Don't say it, Ethan cut him off. Peanut isn't the problem. I've been careful. This is different. Rebecca intervened, placing a hand on her husband's arm. Let's not jump to conclusions. If Dr. Chen says it's stress-related, then we should focus on helping Ethan manage his stress. David didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. 2 days. If it's not better in 2 days, we're going back to the doctor. At school, Ethan's renewed self-consciousness was compounded when he overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. Rounding the corner toward the cafeteria, he caught Blake's voice, uncharacteristically serious. My mom works at the animal shelter, and she says they should report him. Report who? Another voice asked, Trevor from his biology class, the Collins kid, for keeping that infected hamster. She says it's dangerous, maybe even illegal to knowingly keep an animal that's spreading disease. Ethan froze, his lunch tray gripped so tightly his knuckles whitened. After everything, the careful protocols, the basement renovation, the strict hygiene measures, Blake's mother wanted to report his family. The betrayal stung sharply, especially after he'd helped them with Blake's sister. That's messed up, Trevor replied, to Ethan's slight relief. It's not like the hamster has rabies or something. Besides, I heard he's super careful now. Yeah, well, my mom says. Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He retreated down the hall, appetite gone, a new worry added to his growing collection. Could animal control actually take Peanut away? The thought was unbearable. The stress-induced flare-up worsened throughout the day. By afternoon, his face felt hot and tight, the new patch near his hairline now plainly visible despite his attempts to cover it with his hair. Lluvia noticed immediately when they met after school. That wasn't there yesterday, she said, her brow furrowed with concern. Are you okay? Just stress, Ethan said tersely. Dr. Chen says it happens sometimes during recovery. Lluvia hesitated. Maybe you should take a break from the health fair planning. It's a lot of pressure. I can't back out now. Everyone's counting on me. No one will blame you if you need to focus on your health, Lluvia insisted. Mrs. Henderson would understand. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that backing out would be admitting defeat, confirming every doubt his parents had about his ability to manage his condition while keeping Peanut. I'll be fine, he said with more confidence than he felt. When he arrived home, he found his mother engaged in what appeared to be a tense phone conversation in the kitchen. She quickly ended the call when she saw him. Who was that? Ethan asked, immediately suspicious. Rebecca sighed. Mrs. Morrison. She has concerns about our arrangement with Peanut. She wants to report us to animal control, Ethan stated flatly. I overheard Blake talking about it at school. Rebecca's expression confirmed his fears. She's worried about her daughter. Apparently, Sarah's condition has worsened, and she's looking for someone to blame. So she's blaming us after I helped them. The injustice of it burned in his chest. She's scared, Ethan. Parents get irrational when their children are suffering. Rebecca placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. But don't worry. I explained our situation, the precautions we've taken, Dr. Chen's approval of our setup. She seemed less determined by the end of our conversation. But doubt had been planted, and it grew throughout the evening as Ethan attempted to focus on studying for his history final. His mind kept circling back to worst-case scenarios. What if animal control did come? What if they took Peanut away? What if the stress caused his face to revert completely to its worst state? His phone buzzed with a text from Lluvia. Mom says I can't come over until your face clears up again. I'm so sorry. This is ridiculous. The final blow came just before bed. As Ethan went through his nightly routine of checking on Peanut, he noticed something alarming. The hamster was huddled in the corner of her habitat, her usual energetic greeting absent. When he carefully picked her up, gloves on, following protocol, she felt unusually lethargic in his hands. Mom, he called, panic rising in his voice. Something's wrong with Peanut. Rebecca rushed downstairs, followed closely by David. They found Ethan cradling the hamster, tears threatening. She's not acting right, he explained, his voice cracking. She won't eat her treats and she's barely moving. David frowned, observing from a safe distance. Could be anything, maybe she's just tired. Hamsters don't get just tired, Ethan countered, his voice rising with desperation. When they act sick, it's usually serious. We need to take her to a vet. At this hour, David checked his watch. It's almost 10 o'clock. We'd have to find an emergency clinic. Then let's find one, Ethan insisted, his voice cracking with emotion. Rebecca and David exchanged one of those looks that Ethan had come to recognize, the silent parental communication that preceded difficult decisions. Ethan, his mother began gently, I know you're worried, but it's very late. Let's see how Peanut is in the morning. If she's still lethargic, we'll call the vet first thing. That could be too late, Ethan protested. Hamsters hide illness until they're really sick. By morning, she could be. He couldn't finish the sentence. Son, David said firmly, we understand you're upset, but you're also exhausted and stressed, which is making your own condition worse. Put Peanut back in her habitat, make sure she has fresh water, and we'll reassess in the morning. The finality in his father's tone made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. With shaking hands, Ethan returned Peanut to her habitat, whispering promises to return at first light. That night, sleep evaded him completely. Every creak of the house had him wondering if Peanut was crying out for help. His face burned and itched, the stress exacerbating his symptoms exactly as Dr. Chen had warned. Around 3 in the morning, he crept downstairs to check on her, finding her still huddled in the same position, barely acknowledging his presence. By dawn, Ethan had spiraled into a pit of anxiety and despair. The new lesions on his face had indeed worsened. His beloved pet was ill with an unknown ailment. His girlfriend was forbidden from visiting, and the threat loomed of losing Peanut entirely to animal control. All the progress of recent weeks seemed to be unraveling around him. When his alarm sounded for school, he made a decision. Gathering his backpack and Peanut in her travel carrier, he slipped out the back door before his parents awoke. If they wouldn't take his concerns seriously, he would find someone who would. What he didn't realize as he set out in the pale morning light was that his impulsive decision would trigger a chain of events that would change everything, for better and for worse. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when Ethan found himself sitting on a bench outside Riverside Animal Hospital, Peanut's carrier clutched in his lap. The clinic wouldn't open for another hour according to the hours posted on the door, but he couldn't bear the thought of returning home to face his parents' anger and disappointment. His phone had been buzzing intermittently for the past 20 minutes. Undoubtedly, his parents discovering his absence and the hastily scrawled note he'd left. Taking Peanut to the vet. Be back later. He deliberately kept it vague, partly out of his own uncertainty about what would happen and partly to avoid his parents intercepting him before he could get help for his beloved pet. A silver SUV pulled into the parking lot, and a middle-aged woman in scrubs emerged, coffee cup in hand. She noticed Ethan immediately and approached with a curious but kind expression. We don't open until 8, she said, though her tone was gentle rather than dismissive. Is everything all right? Ethan stood, trying to look more composed than he felt. My hamster is sick. She's been lethargic since last night, not eating or drinking. I know it's early, but hamsters can go downhill really fast, and I didn't know where else to go. The woman, Dr. Susan Parker, according to her name tag, studied him for a moment, her gaze briefly taking in the red patches on his face before returning to his eyes. Come on in, she said finally, unlocking the door. I can take a look while my assistant gets the office ready. Relief washed over Ethan as he followed her inside. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and pet food, a combination that would have concerned him a few months ago, but now seemed almost comforting in its clinical familiarity. Doctor Parker led him to an examination room and gestured for him to place Peanut's carrier on the table. How long have you had her? About 2 years, Ethan replied, carefully opening the carrier. Peanut remained huddled in the back, showing none of her usual curiosity about new surroundings. She's never been sick before, not like this. As the veterinarian gently examined Peanut, Ethan's phone buzzed again. This time he glanced at the screen to see Olivia's name. Your parents are freaking out, her text read. Where are you? He quickly typed back. At Riverside Animal Hospital with Peanut. She's sick. Please tell them I'm okay. Is she the source of your fungal infection? Dr. Parker asked, glancing up from her examination. Ethan startled. How did you know about that? A small smile crossed her face. Small town. Medical professionals tend to talk, and Dr. Chen is my daughter's pediatrician. She mentioned an interesting case involving a teenager and his hamster. I'm guessing that's you. Ethan nodded, unsure whether this connection would help or harm his situation. Well, I can tell you one thing right away, Dr. Parker continued, gently opening Peanut's mouth. Your hamster doesn't have a fungal problem. What she has is overgrown teeth. Teeth. Ethan echoed, confusion replacing worry. Hamster teeth grow continuously throughout their lives, she explained, showing him how Peanut's molars had developed sharp edges. Usually they wear them down naturally by chewing on hard foods and toys, but sometimes they grow unevenly. See these points here? They're probably causing pain when she eats, which is why she stopped. It's a common issue in hamsters her age. Relief and disbelief mingled in Ethan's chest. So she's not dying? Not at all. It's a simple procedure to file them down. We can do it today, and she should be back to normal in a day or two. The tension that had been building in Ethan for hours suddenly released, leaving him lightheaded. That's great news. As Dr. Parker prepared the necessary equipment, explaining the procedure in detail, Ethan's phone rang. His father's name flashed on the screen. I should probably answer this, he said apologetically. Dr. Parker nodded. Take your time. I need to get a few things ready anyway. Stepping into the hallway, Ethan took a deep breath and accepted the call. Dad, I'm sorry. Where exactly are you? David's voice was tight with controlled anger and worry. Your mother is beside herself. I'm at Riverside Animal Hospital with Peanut. She needed help, and you guys wouldn't listen to me. So you just disappeared without a word? Do you have any idea how irresponsible that is? I left a note, Ethan defended weakly. A note saying you'd be back later is not sufficient information when you're 16 and have a medical condition. His father's voice rose before he audibly composed himself. We're coming to get you. Stay where you are. Before Ethan could respond, the call ended. He leaned against the wall, torn between relief at Peanut's diagnosis and dread of facing his parents' anger. When he returned to the examination room, Dr. Parker was preparing a mild sedative for Peanut. Everything okay? She asked, noting his expression. My parents are on their way, Ethan said. They're pretty mad. Understandable, she replied neutrally. Want to tell me what prompted this morning adventure while we wait for the sedative to take effect? Ethan found himself pouring out the whole story, not just Peanut's apparent illness, but the flare-up of his skin condition, Olivia's parents banning her from seeing him, Blake's mother threatening to report them to animal control, and his growing fear that he was losing everything he cared about. Dr. Parker listened without interruption, occasionally checking Peanut's response to the sedative. When he finally ran out of words, she offered a thoughtful nod. That's quite a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone your age, she said. But I think there's something you should know about these fungal skin conditions. She pulled up a stool and sat across from him. They're much more common than people realize, especially among people who work with animals. Most cases are mild and go unrecognized or misdiagnosed. What made yours severe was the combination of delayed proper treatment and the inadvertent use of steroid cream. I know all that, Ethan said, not unkindly. Yes, but what you might not know is that these recurrences during treatment, like what you're experiencing now, are almost always temporary stress reactions. Your body remembers the inflammation pattern and reproduces it when you're under extreme pressure. It's not necessarily a reinfection. Ethan touched his face unconsciously. So it's not getting worse again, it's just stress? Most likely. And as for Mrs. Morrison's threats about animal control, Dr. Parker shook her head. I happen to sit on the board that oversees the local animal shelter where she volunteers. There's no legal basis for removing a pet that's being properly managed, especially when you have documentation from a physician approving your containment protocols. The knot in Ethan's chest loosened slightly. Really? Really? In fact, if her daughter's condition is worsening despite treatment, they should be looking at their own pet management, not pointing fingers at yours. Before Ethan could respond, the clinic door chimed, and moments later both his parents appeared in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of relief and lingering anger. Ethan Collins, his mother began, but Dr. Parker raised a hand. Mr. and Mrs. Collins, I presume? I'm Dr. Parker. Your son brought his hamster in for an urgent issue, and it's fortunate that he did. We're about to perform a routine dental procedure that should resolve her symptoms completely. The professional intervention momentarily diffused the tension. David and Rebecca exchanged confused glances. Dental procedure? Rebecca repeated. Peanut has overgrown molars, Ethan explained, feeling a surge of vindication. That's why she wasn't eating. It wasn't anything to do with the fungus. Dr. Parker confirmed this with a nod. Quite common in hamsters, actually. Completely unrelated to any fungal issues. Which, speaking of, she turned to Ethan's parents. I understand there's been some concern about the hamster being a continued health risk. As both a veterinarian and someone familiar with zoonotic disease protocols, I'd be happy to provide documentation confirming that your containment setup, as described to me, exceeds standard recommendations. The unexpected ally left David and Rebecca momentarily speechless. Finally, David cleared his throat. That would be very helpful, actually. There's been some discussion with another parent about potential risks. Mrs. Morrison, Ethan supplied. Ah, Dr. Parker's expression suggested she was familiar with the woman in question. Well, I'd be glad to speak with her directly if needed. Now, this procedure will take about 30 minutes. You're welcome to wait, or I can call you when we're finished. To Ethan's surprise, his parents opted to stay. As they settled into the waiting room, the initial anger seemed to have dissipated, replaced by a tentative calm. Rebecca sat beside Ethan, studying his face with maternal concern. Your skin looks worse, she observed quietly. Dr. Parker says it's probably just stress, Ethan replied. Not a real recurrence, Rebecca nodded slowly. We were so worried when we found your note. After everything with your skin and then you disappearing. I'm sorry, Ethan said, meaning it. I couldn't bear the thought of something happening to Peanut because we waited too long. His father, who had been standing by the window, turned toward them. You know, son, that's exactly how we felt when we first saw what was happening to your face. That fear that waiting might make things worse. He sat down on Ethan's other side. I guess we're more alike than we realize. The simple observation, offered without judgment, struck Ethan deeply. For the first time, he truly understood his parents' perspective, not just intellectually, but emotionally. Their insistence on getting rid of Peanut hadn't been callous disregard for his feelings, but genuine fear for his well-being. The same fear that had driven him to this veterinary clinic at dawn. As they waited for Peanut's procedure to be completed, a new understanding seemed to settle between them, unspoken but profound. Their shared concern for those they loved, whether human or animal, had created conflict, but ultimately revealed a deeper connection. When Dr. Parker finally emerged with a groggy but visibly improved Peanut, Ethan felt a sense of resolution that extended beyond his pet's health. Something fundamental had shifted, a truth revealed not through words, but through the parallel experiences that had brought them all to this moment of clarity. 6 months after the fateful diagnosis that had upended his life, Ethan Collins stood at the podium in Riverside High's auditorium, scanning the faces of the assembled freshman and sophomore health classes. The nervous flutter in his stomach reminded him of how far he'd come, from the boy who had hidden beneath hoodies and baseball caps to someone confident enough to share his story publicly. "And I first noticed the red spots on my face last spring," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "I made a mistake that many of us make. I assumed I knew what was happening to my body. I diagnosed myself with ordinary acne and treated it accordingly." On the large screen behind him, a photograph appeared, one that lluvia had taken during the worst phase of his condition, showing the angry red rings and scaly patches that had once covered his face. A murmur rippled through the audience. "This," Ethan continued, "is what happened when I was wrong. What I had wasn't acne at all, but a fungal infection called tinea faciei, contracted from my pet hamster. And my self-treatment with the wrong medications made it significantly worse." From his position at the podium, Ethan could see his parents seated in the back row, his mother dabbing at her eyes with a tissue despite her proud smile. In the front row sat Dr. Chen, who had taken time from her busy practice to support his presentation. And beside her, surprisingly, was Dr. Parker, the veterinarian who had become an unexpected ally in the saga of Peanut's dental issues. Today, I want to share not just what happened to me medically, Ethan said, advancing to the next slide showing a comparison of common adolescent skin conditions, but what I learned about the importance of proper diagnosis, the connection between human and animal health, and how to maintain relationships with beloved pets even when health challenges arise. For the next 25 minutes, Ethan guided his audience through his journey, the initial misdiagnosis, the worsening condition, the eventual proper treatment, and the elaborate protocols his family had developed to safely keep Peanut. He spoke with a confidence that surprised even himself, weaving scientific information about zoonotic diseases alongside the emotional reality of facing a visible skin condition during the already challenging years of adolescence. The most important lesson I learned, he said as he approached his conclusion, is that knowledge is power. Understanding exactly what was happening to my skin allowed me to treat it correctly. Understanding how the fungus was transmitted allowed us to create safe handling protocols. And understanding that Peanut could stay in my life with the right precautions made all the difference to my recovery, both physical and emotional. As the lights came up for the question and answer session, Ethan caught sight of Blake Morrison in the third row, his younger sister Sarah beside him. The two siblings had become unexpected regulars at what Olivia jokingly called the Collins hamster management tutorials, weekly sessions where Ethan demonstrated proper animal handling techniques to prevent disease transmission. The Morrison family's initial hostility had transformed into grudging respect and eventually genuine appreciation after Dr. Parker's intervention. Her professional assessment of the Collins family's hamster protocols, coupled with her discovery that the Morrisons' guinea pig cage needed significant sanitation improvements, had completely shifted the narrative. Mrs. Morrison, rather than reporting them to animal control, had eventually approached Rebecca Collins to apologize, admitting that her fear for her daughter had clouded her judgment. "How long did it take for your face to completely heal?" asked a freshman girl, her hand tentatively raised. "About 3 months for the visible signs to disappear," Ethan answered honestly. "But even now, if I get extremely stressed or overtired, I sometimes get small flare-ups, just little red patches that go away quickly with proper care. Dr. Chen says that's normal after such a severe case." As if on cue, Dr. Chen nodded confirmation from her seat. Her continued support had been invaluable, not just medically, but in helping Ethan develop the scientific portion of his presentation. She had even connected him with a dermatology program for high school students interested in medical careers, a path Ethan was now seriously considering alongside his photography interests. "Do you still have the hamster?" came another question, this time from a boy near the back. Ethan smiled. "I do. Peanut lives in a specially designed habitat in our basement. I still care for her daily, but with proper precautions, gloves, dedicated clothing, and strict hand-washing protocols." He advanced to a slide showing the elaborate setup his father had built. "It takes extra effort, but some relationships are worth it." That statement prompted a subtle squeeze of his hand from Olivia, who had been standing supportively at the side of the stage. Their relationship had not only survived the ordeal but deepened through it. After her initial fear-driven distance, Olivia had become his most steadfast advocate, even standing up to her own parents when they had tried to prevent her from seeing him during his recovery. "My mom thought it was contagious like a cold," she had explained to Ethan later. "I had to show her all the research proving it doesn't spread from person to person unless there's direct contact with the fungus." Olivia's parents had eventually come around, though Mrs. Reynolds still eyed Ethan's face searchingly whenever he visited their home, as if expecting the fungus to reappear at any moment. As the presentation concluded with enthusiastic applause, Principal Stevens approached the podium to thank Ethan. "This kind of peer education is invaluable," she said, addressing the audience. "Mr. Collins' willingness to share his experience transforms a personal challenge into a learning opportunity for all of us." Afterward, as students filed out of the auditorium, several lingered to speak with Ethan privately. One sophomore boy showed him a patch of discolored skin on his arm, asking in a hushed voice whether it looked like fungus. A freshman girl confided that her new kitten had given her ringworm, and she'd been too embarrassed to tell anyone. Each conversation reinforced what Ethan had come to understand, that his suffering had given him a purpose he'd never anticipated. "You were wonderful," his grandfather declared, embracing him when the crowd had thinned. Robert Collins had driven 3 hours to attend the presentation, his weathered face beaming with pride. "Knew you had it in you, boy, taking something hard and making it matter." "Thanks, Grandpa," Ethan replied, genuinely moved by his grandfather's presence. Their bond had strengthened considerably through the ordeal, with Robert's own experience with skin issues creating a unique understanding between them. That evening, the Collins hosted a small celebration dinner. Olivia was there, of course, along with Dr. Chen and Dr. Parker, whose unlikely friendship had blossomed from their professional connection through Ethan's case. Blake and Sarah Morrison had even been invited, their presence a testament to how completely the dynamics had shifted over the past months. As Rebecca served her famous apple pie for dessert, conversations flowed easily around the table. Dr. Chen discussed the latest research on fungal treatments, Blake shared news about his acceptance to community college, Olivia outlined her plans for the upcoming school newspaper feature on Ethan's presentation. "I never would have predicted this 6 months ago," David commented quietly to Ethan as they observed the lively gathering. "When I first saw what was happening to your face, I thought our biggest challenge would be getting you proper treatment. I never imagined we'd end up here." "Me neither," Ethan admitted. "Back then, I could only focus on what I was losing, my appearance, my social standing, potentially Peanut. I couldn't see that I might gain something too." After dinner, while the adults lingered over coffee in the dining room, Ethan led Olivia, Blake, and Sarah down to the basement to check on Peanut. The space had evolved over the months, transforming from a utilitarian containment setup to something more resembling a proper hamster sanctuary. Ethan had added plants, improved lighting, and constructed climbing platforms that Peanut could explore during her supervised exercise time. "She looks great," Sarah observed as they watched the hamster hop energetically around her enclosure. "Way better than our guinea pigs did before we fixed their cage." "That's because Ethan is the hamster whisperer," Olivia teased, leaning affectionately against Ethan's shoulder. Blake, who had once been the source of Ethan's greatest humiliation, now watched the hamster with genuine interest. "You know, I'm thinking about veterinary technology programs after community college," he said somewhat hesitantly. "Dr. Parker said there's a growing need for specialists in exotic pets." "That's awesome," Ethan responded, still occasionally surprised by the new camaraderie between them. "You'd be good at it." As they made their way back upstairs, Ethan found himself reflecting on the strange journey of the past year. His skin had healed, leaving only the faintest discoloration that Dr. Chen assured him would fade completely with time. More significant were the invisible changes, the newfound confidence, the deeper relationships, the sense of purpose that had emerged from adversity. Later that night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet, Ethan sat at his desk, composing an email to the director of the summer photography program at the Art Institute of Chicago. His application portfolio was nearly complete, featuring a series titled Beneath the Surface. Close-up images of animal fur, feathers, and scales paired with microscopic photographs of the bacteria and fungi that naturally occurred on them. Dr. Chen had helped him access the microscopic images through a medical photography database, impressed by his concept of revealing the invisible worlds that existed alongside the visible ones. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "You were amazing today. So proud of you." Ethan smiled, typing back, "Couldn't have done it without you." It was true. Without Olivia's steadfastness, his parents' determination, his grandfather's wisdom, and even the unexpected alliances with Dr. Parker and the Morrisons, his story might have had a very different ending. What had begun as a solitary struggle had become, somewhat miraculously, a community journey. Before turning in for the night, Ethan completed his evening ritual, checking on Peanut one last time. As he carefully donned his gloves and descended to the basement, he reflected on his grandfather's words from months earlier. "Our skin tells our stories." His own story had proven more complex and ultimately more redemptive than he could have imagined when those first red spots appeared. The crisis that had seemed like the end of his world had instead been a beginning of deeper understanding, of genuine connections, of purpose discovered through pain. Peanut greeted him with her characteristic nose twitches, completely unaware of her pivotal role in his transformation. Ethan refreshed her water and gave her a small treat, following the protocols that had become second nature. "Good night, troublemaker," he murmured affectionately. "Thanks for changing my life." As he climbed the stairs to his bedroom, Ethan caught sight of his reflection in the hallway mirror. The face looking back at him was his own again, clear, healthy, and somehow more mature than it had been a year ago. But beyond the physical healing, what struck him most was the expression in his eyes. A quiet confidence that hadn't been there before, a resilience forged through challenge and triumph. Some marks, he had learned, were temporary, red rings that faded with proper treatment and time. Others were permanent, the invisible imprints of experience that shaped character and perspective. Both kinds of marks had their purpose. Both were part of the ongoing story written on his skin, in his relationships, and in the person he was becoming. As he drifted toward sleep, Ethan found himself grateful for all of it: the struggle and the resolution, the pain and the healing, the fear and the courage that had followed. What had once seemed like his greatest misfortune had become, against all odds, one of his life's most valuable gifts. Life has a way of teaching us its most important lessons through our greatest challenges. Ethan's journey reminds us that resilience isn't about avoiding difficulties, but about finding strength we didn't know we had when faced with them. Like the wrinkles on weathered hands that tell stories of years well lived, his temporary skin condition etched permanent wisdom into his young soul. How many of us have watched our children or grandchildren struggle with their appearance in this age of social media perfection? This story speaks to the concern we carry in our hearts for the young people we love. It echoes the sacrifices we make for beloved pets that become family members, the misunderstandings with neighbors that eventually heal, and the pride we feel when young people rise above their troubles to help others. In our day, we didn't always talk openly about our problems. We endured them quietly, sometimes alone. But Ethan's story shows us a better way. How vulnerability can create connection, how sharing our struggles helps others, and how the things we think might break us often make us stronger instead. As we navigate our own challenges, isn't this the wisdom we hope to pass down? That our scars, visible and invisible, aren't just marks of pain, but badges of survival, growth, and ultimately, triumph. That sometimes our greatest gifts come wrapped in our most difficult experiences, and that the courage to face adversity with grace can transform not just our own lives, but the lives of everyone around us.
Thank you for spending this time with Brad Arrows. We hope the stories whispered through the rain carried you far into your imagination or your dreams. If you're still awake, let us know how you liked the journey. Until next time, stay safe, sleep well, and let the darkness comfort you.